The Ghost Specialist. By Incarnated Wisp. Genre, FanFiction. Completed. Strategy. Action. Adventure. Chapter 11. Fury swipes. Claws swiped down at Cyndaquil, rapidly aiming to dig into her sides. She repeatedly hopped back with each attempted scratch, the swipes of the move barely missing her by a hair. Ember! Sam shouted. Cyndaquil's opponent was a teddy ursa, a small, bipedal bear roughly her size with brown fur and a crescent mark on its forehead. Facing it was tough, as the normal type had immediately rushed forward to try to overwhelm her. Yet, the fire on her back blazed at full power and she breathed out. Ember hit. The fire-type move struck Teddy Ursa, leaving burn marks on its fur. It stumbled back, bringing its arms up to try to protect its face, but that just meant its stomach was no longer guarded. Taking advantage of that, Sam called for a tackle, and Cyndaquil pushed off the ground to slam her shoulder into its chest. Teddy Ursa fell to the ground. The referee shouted to end the match. Teddy Ursa is unable to battle. Cyndaquil wins. There you go, Cyndaquil. We got our first win. Sam shouted. There was a smattering of polite clapping off to the sides, but it was nothing too impressed. While this was Sam's first victory as a Pokémon trainer, it had still only been a match between two novice trainers. Observers could only get so much out of it at this level. Great battle. Cyndaquil hasn't been pushed that hard up close before, Sam said, moving forward to shake his opponent's hand. You sure? Because it looked like she was leaping back pretty nimbly there. He chuckled awkwardly. What he said was only partially true. With all the ways Delcatty annoyed Cyndaquil during their spars, Cyndaquil had grown used to opponents trying to strike her up close. Well, your Pokémon was still impressive regardless, Sam said. The girl grinned. Yeah, she replied. Sam's opponent was a girl around his age, though she was maybe a few months older than him since she practically matched him in height. She wore a set of blue overalls over a striped, black and white t-shirt, and her blonde hair was kept in a ponytail that hung down her back. As Sam moved off to the side of the field, she followed, and Cyndaquil prodded the side of Teddy Ursa with her snout to wake it up and encourage it to follow. The girl smiled and waved for it to follow along, too. You haven't explained why you were so quick to challenge me at the end of the last battle, Sam said. I thought people would be turned away by my starter Pokémon. PSH. I wanted to challenge you because I saw your battle. And that last guy was a jerk. I can tell you're pretty cool with how you talked back to him. Why wouldn't I want to have a match? Thank you. Sam said. Yeah. No problem, she said genuinely. Anyway, what's your name? My name is Reedy. Sam blinked. Did I really battle her without any introductions? He supposed that was what the life of a Pokémon trainer now entailed. I'm Sam, and that's Cyndaquil, obviously, he said. And you said your name is Reedy. Reedy, she corrected. Reedy. Reedy, she repeated, emphasizing the alternate spelling with her voice. Sam rubbed the side of his head. He thought her name was silly, but he wasn't going to comment on it. Heading over, the ship's Pokémon Center wasn't anything that special. An unassuming nurse and a Chansey worked a counter that was built into an open space along a wall. Reedy and Sam returned their Pokémon before passing their Pokeballs over. The nurse thanked them before handing the balls off to Chansey to bring to a back room to heal. Anyway, Reedy, have you been training with Teddy Ursa for a while? He was pretty strong in our match, Sam said, finding a place to sit down on a nearby bench. Not really. I mean, I've known him for years, but we haven't really practiced, she replied, sitting down next to him. I took him with me when I heard about the tournament coming up. That's the whole reason we're on this ship, anyway. Tournament? Sam asked. Reedy blinked at him. Don't tell me you don't know, she said. Sam's blank look was an answer in itself. Reedy sighed and pressed her hands together in front of her lips. Okay. So there's the tournament, yeah? But it's the beginner's tournament, it's not for anyone experienced. Every region has one. Basically, at the start of each season, a random city in a region will host a tournament to see which novice trainer has the best chance to make it to the end-of-season conference. Winning is a good way to attract sponsorships, earn prizes, make money. She put a surprising amount of emphasis on the word money. And this year it's taking place in Olivine City. Once this boat docks, I think just about everyone here is going to sign up for it. At least the novices are, Sam said. I mean, yeah, that's assumed. What, do you really think a trainer who's earned a bunch of gym badges is going to be allowed in? She then snorted and laughed at her own joke. Sam just rolled his eyes. Anyway, me and Teddy Ursa are totally gonna sweep that tournament. See, we have a trick, we don't need strategy when we have power. Everyone always thinks you need some special plan to win your battles, but the way I see it is that everyone overlooks pure, raw power so much that no one is ever prepared for when it punches them in the face. But strategy is important. Sam countered, scratching his cheek. What are you going to do if Teddy Ursa gets burned? Push through and punch them in the face, Reedy easily replied. Well, I suppose that's one way to do it. So, what did you think? She asked, grinning. Gonna compete? Definitely, Sam answered. I was planning on only taking on Olivine's gym, but if there's a whole tournament taking place there, there's no way we can pass that up. Reedy's grin went as wide as it could go, and she kicked her legs back and forth while leaning back on the bench. Sick, she said. But I gotta ask, if you didn't know about the tournament, you at least made plans before heading out, yeah? You have a place to stay. Sam's smile wavered. Reedy suddenly looked worried. You have a place, right? She repeated. I was going to stay in the Pokémon Center, he replied slowly. Ooh, Reedy looked away from Sam awkwardly. People always fill the big cities when the season starts. Like, gym battle slots are reserved weeks in advance, and Olivine's gonna be packed with all these extra tournament trainers taking up rooms. You might, not find a place to stay. Sam groaned. I just wanted to start my journey off properly, he said, bringing his head into his hands. Reedy patted him on the shoulder to try to comfort him. She let a few seconds pass before speaking again. I mean, you could always, she hesitated at first before repeating what she said with newfound confidence. You could always stay with me. Sam blinked. With you? Yeah. My aunt is always open to guests. She wouldn't mind helping out someone in need. Sam stared at Reedy with a blank look on his face. She smiled back, not even blinking at how she just offered a family member's home to someone who was basically a stranger. Maybe, Sam eventually said. The offer was a little awkward. I'll check to see if there really is no other place to stay, first. Reedy shrugged and hopped off the bench. The Pokémon Center Chansey walked back out with their Pokémon. Your loss. I'll still give you her address when you find out I'm right. She then leaned in, almost mischievously, her words taking on a conspiratorial tone. And just so you know, I'm always right. Reedy walked away to collect her Pokémon, cackling. Walking over to the Pokémon Center himself, Sam grabbed both Cyndaquil's Pokeball and a piece of paper containing Reedy's aunt's address before sending Cyndaquil out on the ground. Reedy went ahead and stalked off to rejoin the nearby crowd, crouching slightly as if becoming a predator on a hunt for prey, another opponent. 2 back-to-back battles are enough for now, Sam said to Cyndaquil. I think we should head back to our room to rest and talk about what we can do to improve. Cyndaquil nodded, both tired and in agreement, and she and Sam returned to do exactly as he said. Over the rest of the trip, she and Sam managed to get a few more battles in before the ship finally arrived in Johto. Sam was struck with awe when he entered Olivine City. The port was nowhere near as large as Slate Port, but the buildings were tall enough to scratch the sky. Office buildings, shopping malls, dozens of different apartment complexes. This place was a true city, one not limited to space available on an island. Streets filled with actual cars divided the city's blocks, and Pokémon were surprisingly common here, too. Though there was only the occasional trainer Pokémon, Sam did see Pidgey perched on signs, Rattata running through alleys, and the occasional Meowth having found a warm spot to sleep in. We're definitely not in Hoenn anymore. All of these species are firmly from Johto. Cyndaquil made a mumbling noise of agreement from where she sat in his hood. Just like Sam, she was lost in taking in the sights. Other than the sights of the city itself, Sam also saw quite a number of decorations. Banners hung between streetlights. Lamp posts had announcements taped to them. A few posters had been placed against covered, chain-link fences that blocked off construction sites. All of them advertised the very thing Reedy had told Sam about not too long before. The beginners tournament, it wasn't something always held within Olivine, but it would be this year. It advertised how the winners tended to be trainers to look out for. Historically, the trainers that placed almost always earned all 8 gym badges. I want to win it, Sam thought. Unfortunately, he was aware of his lack of experience, but now that he was in Johto, this was the perfect time to obtain it. Filled with anticipation, Sam broke out into a run. He then stopped and politely asked a passerby for directions, where he followed what they said to reach the Pokémon Center. The building wasn't the usual, few-story tall building he was used to. It still had the red roof that he was expecting, but it absolutely fit in with the rest of the towering buildings of this city. Pokémon centers were created to both provide easy-to-access healing for the average trainer while also providing a way for traveling trainers to rest. This place had gone all in on that, being at least 7 stories tall and absolutely covered with windows that showed off the sheer number of rooms within. Sam had never stayed at a Pokémon Center before, and though he was away from home, he pushed past that longing and focused on the excitement. "Ready for this?" he asked Cyndaquil. She squeaked, affirming that she was, and then Sam headed inside. Immediately, Sam was assaulted by noise. The sliding glass door automatically opened up, and just past the entrance, the waiting room was absolutely packed. Trainers filled the space, lounging on couches, leaning against the walls, and occupying every video phone set up against the back wall. There was a line that stretched from the nurse's counter to only a few feet in front of the front door. To say this place was packed was an understatement. It was absolutely filled to the brim. Briefly, he recalled the warning Reedy gave him. "Maybe they have at least one spare room left," he mumbled. It took half an hour of waiting in line for Sam to reach the front counter. It was half an hour of standing, waiting, and doing nothing at all. Despite it not requiring much from him, the fact such a short distance took so long to travel made Sam feel utterly exhausted by the end. "Welcome to the Pokémon Center," a nurse's voice said to snap him out of his daze. "We can restore your Pokémon to full health. Would you like to rest your Pokémon?" A pink-haired nurse smiled at him and waited for his response. Sam's voice came out shaky, so he swallowed and forced himself to be confident. "I'd like to register for the upcoming Johto League. I'd also like to register for the beginners tournament." "Certainly. May I have your information?" Sam provided it, and the nurse turned in her chair to start quickly typing away on a computer at the front desk. There were 2 other nurses here, too, and each of them were helping their own trainer to the left and right of Sam. "All right. Give me 1 moment for your trainer card to print out." There was a beep followed by a whirring noise. After a few seconds, the nurse leaned over and pulled something from under her desk. She handed it over, and Sam took it to hold with awe. Trainer cards identified Pokémon trainers. They contained absolutely everything about the trainer they belonged to. Name, region of origin, unique trainer ID number, as well as the number of gym badges that trainer had earned. Holding one was required to compete in a gym, and a number of different tournaments were restricted to registered trainers. With this now in his hands, Sam had proof he was truly a Pokémon trainer. It marked the beginning of the rest of his life. "Sir." Sam snapped his head up, the nurse's voice breaking him out of his trance once again. "Why yet? It'll take some time for your trainer ID to be fully processed with the league, but since you were already registered as a non-competing trainer in Hone, that will speed some things up. Before then, do you need to hear the rules of the tournament?" "That would be nice, thanks," Sam said, blushing at his brief lapse of attention. The nurse cleared her throat. The beginners tournament follows the same setup as the end of the year conference, though it's adjusted for smaller teams. It consists of a group preliminary to determine the competing trainers followed by the actual tournament itself. The preliminaries are set to take place in 5 days, and the tournament itself will occur in exactly 1 week. Although, I'll note that only 32 trainers will make it out of the preliminaries. You must not be eliminated if you want to compete. Of course. Sam nodded his head, his gaze locked straight ahead. At that, the nurse gained an amused smile. "I'm sure you'll do great. Make sure to arrive here by 10 a.m. the day of." "Okay. Got it," Sam said. "And, if it's a tournament, how many?" "Our estimates bring the number of registered trainers to be around 400. Most trainers here are here for Olivine Gym. But, if your question is about how many Pokémon will be in each match." Sam nodded, encouraging her to continue. "Only 1 Pokémon will be allowed in each battle of the preliminaries, but up to 3 Pokémon are allowed on a team in the actual tournament. If you have only 1 Pokémon, I highly recommend catching another. Otherwise, you'd be sending your soul fighter through a series of difficult, back-to-back fights." Sam grimaced. He needed a way to practice with Cyndaquil, but throwing her into matches like that would serve only to tire her out and leave her exhausted by the end. The nurse was right, if he wanted to win, he needed a second Pokémon. But where can I catch a ghost type in a city like this? Can I help you with anything else? The nurse said, smiling. Yes. Do you have a free room? Her smile wavered, and Sam's expression fell. Is there somewhere else nearby I could maybe find a place? He asked cautiously. A length of awkward silence persisted, which only served to make Sam feel worse and worse. Maybe it might be worth camping at the city's edge? Trainers are constantly roughing it in the wild, the nurse offered, doing her best to maintain that strained smile. The news hit Sam like a rock. Sighing, he thanked the nurse before stepping out of the Pokémon Center. At least we managed to register properly, he said to Cyndaquil. After a few hours of checking other locations only to confirm a lack of free rooms, Sam found himself knocking on the door of a house within the city's suburbs. There, it opened up, and on the other side was a certain blonde girl with an utterly smug grin on her face. Chapter 12. Sam woke up the next morning in an unfamiliar room. There were no sounds of children playing, wing-ul squawking, or waves lapping against a nearby shore. The bed underneath him was significantly wider and squishier than his bed back home. A ceiling fan lazily spun to provide the barest bit of flowing air as light peeked through a set of mauve curtains to land on his eyes. Everything around him was decorated in hues of lavender and white. Out of all the places to stay, he had genuinely not expected to sleep in an old woman's guest room like this. Good morning, Cyndaquil, Sam said. He sat up and rubbed his eyes. From where she had snuggled into a pile of far too many pillows, Cyndaquil poked her head out. It was oddly quiet. Olivine was a big city, and Sam would have expected some noise. Except, he wasn't in the center of the city. Instead, he was rooming in its suburbs, located in the hills to the northwest. I might only have $100 on me, but I would have found a hotel instead of this, Sam mumbled. It wasn't that he wasn't thankful, it was just that it felt awkward to stay at the home of someone he barely knew. All right. Plans, Sam said, standing up and arching his back to help him wake up. Today, we'll need to call Mom, but we have until the tournament to do what we want. Training's a given, but I guess we could explore? Ugh, actually, we should figure out our money situation first. Plus, I don't really know what to talk to Mom about, anyway. Maybe I'll just tell her that I'm staying with a friend? But I don't know Reedy that well. I can at least talk about the tournament. She'll enjoy hearing about that. Given Sam couldn't hear the sounds of people shuffling around the house, he didn't want to be rude and wake them up. Instead, he stayed in the guest room for now, reaching into his backpack and pulling out the new Pokédex to flip to a certain page. He yawned and rubbed his eyes. He was trying to force himself to stay awake, but he didn't have the energy to stand just yet. So. Hisuian Typhlosion, Sam said. Unwilling to do anything else, he could at least discuss his current goal. Upon hearing the name of her eventual evolution, Cyndaquil pushed out of her pillows to trot across the bed and rest her head in Sam's lap. We need to figure out how we'll actually get you to evolve, he said. Cyndaquil stared at the drawing of her alternative final form. Typhlosion were more weasel-shaped than Cyndaquil, and this variant kept the same general body. Except, where the fur on a Typhlosion's back was blue, a Hisuian Typhlosion's fur was purple. Not just that, but it had floppier ears and flames that came out like fading wisps. She took in every inch of the drawing, and Sam let her analyze it in silence. Her thin eyes were locked forward, and she let out the faintest of squeaks. Quill, she said. Basically, she had no clue what to do. Yeah, I get it, Sam said, chuckling slightly before being interrupted by another yawn. There's not anything here that actually states how to become a Hisuian Typhlosion. I mean, all it says is evolve Quilava in ancient Hisui. Time travel isn't a thing. We're going to need to figure out how to achieve it on our own. At least we know it exists. Cyndaquil nodded and pushed forward to curl up against Sam's leg. He started to pet her while turning back to the section on her own species. He read through every detail, intending to find even the slightest of hints for their goal, but the more he read, the more the grimace grew on his face. I mean, it lists all your potentially learnable moves, but there's only a single ghost-type move actually included. And it's Curse. To put it lightly, that was a problem. If Cyndaquil was going to eventually evolve into a ghost-type, Sam wanted her to familiarize herself with ghost-type energy. Yet, the only move she could do that with was Curse, and the move behaved differently for ghost types and non-ghost types. When used by a ghost, Curse sacrificed the user's health to lay a literal curse on the opponent that slowly ate at their vitality. When used by a non-ghost, it instead sacrificed speed to increase physical power and defense. It was such a strange move that most people didn't even think of it as a ghost-type move. Ask any expert about it, and they'd say the move had an unknown type. But Curse was their only lead, so Sam had to chase it. I don't even know where to get started on this. Usually, Curse is either an egg move or a trademark move, so unless we spend a bunch of money to buy you a trademark or we figure out you secretly knew it all along, we're going to have to spend a lot of time training to get you to learn it. Learning moves Pokémon couldn't learn through passive training was possible, it just took a lot of extra practice. Egg moves and trademark moves weren't exclusive to what they were named after, they were just so difficult to figure out otherwise that people were more than willing to dump insane amounts of cash to skip that practice. Then, Sam hummed in thought. I guess we should start trying to figure out how to get you to channel and manipulate ghost-type energy. I'm sorry. I don't know any other way to help. Until I actually manage to catch a ghost type. Cyndaquil put a paw on Sam's arm to tell him that it was okay. Without anything else to talk about, it was just about time to start properly waking up. Ever since Sam started training a month ago, his morning routine became a lot more intensive than before. Instead of immediately getting dressed and stepping out for food, he now worked with Cyndaquil to stretch to warm up for the day. It was light and just something to get their blood pumping, but it was enough to serve the same purpose that a cup of coffee might have had. Of course, once Sam caught a more incorporeal team member, this habit would need to change. As for now, both he and Cyndaquil were rooted firmly enough in the physical that stretching helped enough. By the end of these exercises, shuffling noises became audible from deeper into the house. Sam made sure he was washed up and dressed before he walked out with Cyndaquil. There, he was met with a sleepy-looking Reedy holding Teddy Ursa in her lap. Her grey-haired aunt was making breakfast. Good morning. Reedy's aunt cheerfully said. Did you sleep well? My apologies for not getting the room more set up. I didn't expect Reedy yesterday, and I didn't expect that she would invite a friend. Sam held back a wince. Reedy's aunt was maintaining a kind smile, but he could tell she had been a little caught off guard by her two guests. Reedy, however, was shameless. She had no reaction in the slightest, but that could have also been due to still being half asleep in her seat. I slept fine, Sam said, politely bowing his head in thanks. Thank you for lending me your guest room. Oh, it was no problem at all, she said, smiling and waving him off. The pancakes will be ready in a few minutes. Feel free to indulge in as many as you want. It's always nice to have family around. She turned and began to hum as she returned to cooking, and Sam sat down across from Reedy. The girl yawned and rubbed her eyes. Her Teddy Ursa mimicked her actions in her lap. Mornin', Reedy mumbled. Good morning. Sam offered. She blinked as if not expecting Sam, and after rubbing her eyes again, a smug grin returned to her face. So. You took me up on my offer, hey? She looked properly awake now. We had this conversation last night, he groaned. There wasn't anywhere else to go. Yet, because of the tournament. Somehow, her grin deepened. You signed up, right? Are you going to compete? I signed up yesterday. And you? She kicked her feet back and forth in her chair, and her eyes seemed to gaze dreamily into the distance. I still need to sign up, but of course I'm going to compete. I mean, have you seen the prizes? Wads of cash. A bunch of TMS. Rumors say that Professor Elmhe's Johto's most famous Pokémon professor, by the way, has donated an actual Pokémon egg for the winner. Those are crazy rare. Sam nodded along, but he perked up when he heard Reedy mention TMS. TMS? Do you know what kind? She shrugged. Dunno. They could be preset or some you can choose. Either way, you could probably trade them with other trainers to get the moves you want. Sam knew he wanted to compete in the tournament, but now he really wanted to win. If we can place high enough to earn a trademark, we might be able to figure out Curse sooner rather than later. But what are your plans today, anyway? Want to go with me while I sign up? Reedy asked. Sam sighed. I need to figure out a way to earn more cash, first. For some reason, Reedy's smile became brighter yet again. She replied right away. Great. So you'll be coming with me to the Pokémon Center, after all. Pokémon Centers are amazing, they always have job boards advertising work listings specifically for Pokémon trainers. Those usually involve either some kind of manual labor or fighting against a wild Pokémon, but it's way more consistent to earn money through them than by betting on a match with another trainer. She then nodded her head and rubbed her chin, closing her eyes as if this was a serious matter. You know, my family puts them up all the time back in Vermilion. I haven't really done any myself, but you'd be surprised just how helpful it is to get a Pokémon trainer to help out with work. Pokémon jobs, hey. Sam mumbled. Could solve multiple problems at once. Money, experience, and maybe someone needs help with a ghost type I can catch? Reedy's aunt came out carrying a tray of pancakes soon after, and conversation stopped in favor of shoving as much food as possible into their mouths. Teddy Ursa and Cyndaquil were required to eat on the floor, however. While different from how Sam's family usually did it, each of them still got a hearty helping of sliced oran berries each. Once the food was devoured, Reedy left the room so she could get ready to head out. As a result, Sam was left alone with her aunt, but he at least had enough experience ringing up customers in his mom's shop to know how to be polite despite the awkwardness of the situation. So, sweetie, how did you meet Meredith, anyway? Her aunt asked, calmly eating her own breakfast at the same table. Sam cocked his head to the side. Meredith, he asked. Ah. Oops. She tends to go by Reedy nowadays, but she'll always be little Meredith to me, the old woman replied. Sam hummed, pretending to be cheerful while also desperately trying to figure out a polite way to reply. I met her on the boat over, he said. Did you talk a lot? I mean, we fought, and then she offered to give me a place when she found out I failed to make plans. Reedy's aunt smiled at that, despite how brief that description was. Reedy's always been a kind girl. I'm glad she made a friend. A door slammed open a second later. Sam turned around in his chair. Charging into the room was Reedy and Teddy Ursa, and they both stopped to pose with their fists held against their sides. Ready, Reedy, she shouted, although her face turned bright red when she remembered Sam was still here. To the Pokémon Center, he asked. Yeah. Reedy cleared her throat. There should be one not too far away. Sam thanked Reedy's aunt one last time before heading out with Reedy and their Pokémon. She made sure to hug her aunt before leaving, but she did try to hide the act from Sam. Heading down the road, Cyndaquil sat in Sam's hood like usual while Reedy walked at their side. For a while, she held Teddy Ursa in her arms, but the little bear squirmed his way out to begin to scamper around to better look at the things that interested him. So how do you plan to win the tournament, anyway? Reedy asked. Trying to learn my plans. Sam taunted. PSH. No, just making conversation, Reedy replied. Sam just shrugged. I guess I haven't thought too much about it yet. I want to train more with Cyndaquil first. Good, good. Reedy crossed her arms and nodded along sagely. I suppose that's okay, being in the process of making a plan is fine and all, but do you really think you'll be prepared to beat us? She grinned challengingly. Nearby, Teddy Ursa stopped sniffing a flower to turn and flex his arms at Sam. Seeing that, Sam did his best to puff up his own chest confidently in exchange. I'll weaken you by inflicting a burn, he declared. No way. I told you on the boat, and I'll tell you here. Burn won't mean nothing if we're still able to punch Cyndaquil in the face. On Sam's shoulder, Cyndaquil let out an indignant squeak, and Reedy cackled with glee. Although, for all that he liked spooky ghost-type stories, Sam was still intimidated enough to take a step away. Anyway, I don't really care how we win, Reedy said, shrugging and answering her own question as she almost immediately calmed down. As long as we make money off the tournament, anything is fine with me. Sam went quiet. Truth be told, he was a little embarrassed at how Reedy had a stronger plan for her team than he did. It was basic, sure, but she knew she'd focus on brute strength. As for him, what am I going to do? Brawly told him that running away after inflicting a burn wouldn't be enough. He had the new Pokédex, but his mother made it clear that he needed to learn how to apply it if he wanted to put it to use. He had no plan for his team outside of ghost types. With the tournament so soon, he would not only need to spend all his free time training, but he'd also need to figure out a strategy. I guess for me, all I know is that I want to catch ghost types, Sam said. Once I have a bigger team, I'll figure something else out. Sounds cool. Not a lot of people work with ghost types. Yet. I like them. Reedy purposely elbowed Sam's arm in a friendly manner. It kind of hurt. Good for you, she said. I'm gonna limit myself to just Teddy Ursa for now. Training costs money, so I'm keeping my team small. They reached a Pokémon Center a few minutes later. This wasn't the same one Sam had visited when he first arrived, but it was still a true Pokémon Center within Olivine City. It was located at the edge of town, intending to service the people who didn't live downtown, as only one Pokémon Center couldn't cut it for a population this large. While the one Sam had visited was the main one, this one was an offshoot branch. However, when he stepped inside, it was almost just as full. Reedy pushed through the crowds to join the line waiting for a turn at the counter, and Sam headed to the back, to get a turn on a video phone. It was too early in the day to contact his mother, so he just ended up sending a message to her to schedule a call for when she was free. Once that was taken care of, he then headed to the side of the room, where a corkboard hung on a wall. There, a few papers posted to it listed out notices for trainer assistants, the Pokémon jobs Reedy had mentioned, but everything here was far too difficult for Sam to even think about taking on. A wild Gyarados needs to be beaten back. A herd of Tauros need to be corralled. Ugh, fetch medicine from Kianwood. These are way above my level, but that pay is crazy. Man, once we get stronger. Sam grinned. Turned out, strength and wealth went pretty hand in hand. Despite the lack of jobs posted, there were several other trainers standing around nearby. All of them were staring at the empty board, but it was more than that. They almost looked like they were waiting. Carefully, Sam joined them, thinking that something was going on. There was an edge to the air around them. All of these people were poised to jump. He found out why only a few minutes later. A Chansey walked out of the Pokémon Center's back room carrying a thick stack of papers. The egg-shaped Pokémon waddled up to the board, and Sam realized those notices it held promised new jobs. Everyone seemed to turn into a hunter stalking its prey as the Chansey grabbed the corkboard and took it down. Slowly, one by one, the Pokémon pushed pins in to attach the papers to the board. Sam did his best to see what was being offered, but more and more people started to crowd around to lie in wait, which blocked his view. Just need to be quick. Have to grab the right job. Once it finished putting everything up, the Chansey paused, glanced around, and then it smiled and put the board back up onto the wall. Chansey, it said, and its cry was like a gunshot to start the race. All the waiting trainers charged forward. Sam found himself included in that flood. A Zubat nest to be cleared. A red-haired trainer snatched that one up. Redirect Skiploom heard. A buff man tore the paper off the wall. Gloom perfume testing. Pollution Pokémon garbage collection. More and more people reached out and tore papers away. Sam had to squeeze to see what was listed, but it seemed that every job was being claimed. Hindered by the crowd, Sam could barely see what was on the board. Bold text stood out to him in one moment only to go missing a second later. Except, almost half hidden behind another sheet of paper, one job stood out. It paid so little that everyone else paid it no mind, but it was perfect for him. He lunged, practically screaming as he pushed through the crowd. His hand grabbed onto the edge of the paper, and with a tug, it tore free of the pin keeping it in place. I got one. I got a job. He grinned and took a step back from the crowd. Overall, it was like a feeding school of fish. The mass of trainers swelled around the boards before all the jobs were claimed, where they grumbled and walked away. Behind them, only scraps of paper and the highest level of jobs remained. I'm glad I waited, Sam mumbled. He moved to get in line to report which job he had taken to the local nurse. It wouldn't pay much, only $20, but as he looked over the sheet, he knew it held potential in a different matter. I can't wait. Submitting his acceptance only took showing the sheet and handing over his fresh trainer ID. The nurse smiled and recorded the job as his within the system. Satisfied, he stepped outside, and Reedy joined him right as he passed through the Pokémon Center's front glass doors. Sam managed to get a job, Reedy said. She proudly held up a brand new trainer ID, as if to brag. Yeah, Sam said. He quickly reread the job notice one more time just to make sure. It's not a lot of pay, but I think it might lead me to a new capture. Ooh. What ghost type? Not a ghost type. It's even better, a fighting type. Specifically, I have to deal with a wild Mankey. Reedy's face scrunched up in confusion as he handed over the paper to let her read it over. She glanced between the listing and Sam himself, her bafflement growing the more she read the bolded job listing. Yet, even with her confusion, Sam could only smile. A wild monkey is stealing from fruit stalls? Sure, I'll scare it off. But, by scare it off, I mean I'll catch it. And once it's caught, I'll have a new ghost type to add to the team. No one in Indigo knew the potential a single monkey held. They were physically strong but somewhat fragile fighting types, yet all of that changed when they reached their true final form. It wasn't Primeape, it was a step beyond. Annihilape. A Pokémon so in control of its own rage that it transcends its pure fighting type to become dual fighting and ghost. Even better, unlike Hisuian Typhlosion, Sam actually knew how to achieve that evolution, too. So, with this opportunity presented before him, there was no way he was going to pass it up. Chapter 13. I don't get it. You just told me you wanted to catch a ghost type, Reedy said. Yeah, but this counts, too. How? Mankey evolves into Primeape, and that's a fighting type. Sam left the answer unsaid. Clearly, Reedy didn't have access to a Pokédex as advanced as his. Most people thought the only ghost types in Kanto were the Ghastly Line and Misdreavus, but there was actually one more, they just weren't aware of the evolution. Sure, this would have been different in the far-off region of Paldea, but Sam only ever saw the faintest of references to that place, and only ever in rare texts. Annihilape was completely unknown here, and Sam wanted to be the first trainer to use one on their team. If I can manage to catch this, I can't even imagine what the future response to my team will be like. Hisuian Typhlosion? Annihilape? People won't just be shocked at those evolutions, they won't know how to counter them, either. Sam already found himself cackling at the idea. Being able to catch people off guard like that was the whole reason he wanted to make use of that book. With how much more information he had at his disposal, his final team would be that much stronger than every other ghost-type specialist in the region. No, really, why are you catching a Mankey? Reedy asked flatly. Physical attackers are important. Cyndaquil focuses on special moves. Catching a Mankey rounds off my team, and a fighting type will help counter any normal types, as they're otherwise immune to ghosts, he half-lied. Reedy said, "Hey," and continued to walk in silence. Sam had been worried about his overall team strategy before, but having Mankey fill a needed role like this was a start to putting together the pieces. The job listing Sam held in his hand led him to a street not that far from Olivine's docks. Colorful market stalls lined its sides, and each one sold fresh produce, rare items, or custom arts and crafts. There were oran berries, citrus berries, and a few evolutionary stones. There were even people selling furniture that they advertised were perfect for a secret base. The primary purpose of this market, however, was to sell those berries. The northern route between Olivine City and Ecruteak City had a lot of farms and ranches, and the goods here were part of their usual profits. Sam followed the job sheet's directions to reach a specific stall filled with berries and fruits. There, a scowling woman wearing a green apron wielded a broom while sitting underneath her stall's cloth overhang. She spoke before Sam could say anything. "You here to take care of it?" she said tersely. "Yes," Sam replied, caught off guard by the harsh tone of her voice. "You wanted me to get rid of that Mankey, right?" Her response came in the form of her spitting on the ground and the scowl on her face deepening. "I don't just want you to get rid of it, I want you to make it suffer. It's stolen too much. It deserves to hurt for everything that it's done." Sam unconsciously took a step back. Reedy looked unimpressed. "Man, talk about having a stick up your butt," she mumbled. "Excuse me," the woman said. "I mean, it's just one Pokémon? How much could it have actually done?" The shop owner glared at Reedy, and the heat of the gaze made her be the one to take a step back this time around. "How much could it have done? How much could it have done?" the woman shouted. "That pest has stolen half of my produce, destroyed my crates, left refuse all over anything it leaves behind, and as a Mankey, the noises it makes hurt my ears. Do you even know how much one berry costs?" "No." Reedy offered. $10 for a decent-sized oran berry. More for berries that can cure status conditions. Don't even get me started on how much citrus berries cost. And this thing is constantly shoveling them all into its gullet. Do you know how long it'll take for the Mankey to show up?" Sam asked, interrupting the woman's rant. "Not long. Not long at all. It comes and goes. Comes and goes. So often, it comes by just to taunt. A grunt. The woman narrowed her eyes. It's here, she hissed. Eyes darting around, she clenched her broom even tighter than before. Sam and Reedy both went on guard, and Sam quietly had Cyndaquil leave his hood to stand on the edge of the woman's stall. It was silent. Mostly. The sounds of the market around them still continued. But within this specific vendor space, no one made a noise. Until, a thump. Then, a shadow appeared on the striped cloth that protected the area from the sun. There it is. Get it. And I don't care about property damage if you get it gone, the woman shouted. Sam took that as explicit permission and called for a move that had the potential to set everything on fire. Ember. Flames sparked from Cyndaquil's back as she opened her mouth and sent dozens of burning globs into the air. They struck the cloth overhang and burned through as whatever creature was on top hooted and hollered in surprise. The ember chased it as it rushed towards the edge of the cloth. Through the holes Cyndaquil's move made, Sam caught the sight of coarse, whitish fur and thin limbs. When the shadow reached the side of the overhang, a brown hand grabbed the edge of the cloth. Using that handhold, it swung around to land right within the displayed fruit. It was definitely a mankey, with a rounded body and 2 legs and arms. A thin tail extended out of the base of its back, and it had a pig-like snout underneath its red eyes. It screeched, and the vendor owner let out a battle cry. She swung the broom down, but the mankey hopped back. All she ended up doing was crush her own fruit and send juice spraying everywhere. Man-key. Man-key. Mankey were a species that were known for their impressive rage, but in this case, it didn't seem angry. It instead just seemed to be enjoying the situation. It taunted the woman, laughing as it did. She repeatedly swung her broom at it, and the violent motions prevented Sam from sending Cyndaquil into attack. Attack it, she shouted. I can't. You're in the way. Stop being so useless. She swung a few more times before pulling back, and then Sam was finally able to call for a tackle. Cyndaquil lunged, and Mankey finally locked its eyes onto her. Its mouth was hidden by the fur covering its face, but the way its eyes curved up told Sam it had a mocking smile. Just like what it had done against the woman, it jumped. This time, it hopped right over where Cyndaquil lunged to land behind her, but rather than attack, it started to pick as much as it could up. Its hands grabbed as many berries as they could hold. Its tail wrapped around a nice, juicy citrus berry. Sam shouted for another tackle the same moment the woman swung her broom again. Mankey leaped. Cyndaquil was bonked on the head. The primate used its feet to hang from the roof while laughing, then it swung away to start hopping between the other market stall covers in an attempt to flee. You better chase it, boy, the shop owner shouted. Sam grabbed Cyndaquil. They would be faster if he was the one running and did exactly as said. I'll just be here. Reedy shouted. Good luck with the mankey. All right. I'll be back. She and Teddy Ursa stayed behind as Sam dashed after the fleeing fighting type. If it was a month ago, Sam wouldn't have been able to keep up. Mankey used the agility inherent of a primate to jump from stall to stall, and then from building to building. Before too long, Sam was panting, running down a street rather than the market itself, but Mankey kept going, not even bothering to check what was behind. Thankfully, it was easy to track as it generally followed the same path as the road, but the stamina of a fighting type was far more than what Sam had. He could barely breathe with how much he had to run. The distance between them kept growing, except I refuse to fall behind. I'm catching that mankey no matter what. Sam had already decided this mankey would be joining his team. Sure, it was a bit rude, but the agility it had shown off was incredibly impressive. Block after block, Sam ran after it. It slowly became nothing more than a white blur on the horizon. Yet, even as he slowed, he finally caught sight of the exact scene he wanted. The mankey stopped on top of a 2-story house at the edge of town and slipped through a window on its upper floor. Seeing that, Sam slowed to a jog and eventually stopped, struggling to catch his breath. It was like there was a cinder block attached to his chest, and he found a fence to lean on to recover. While his legs were burning, he had still done it. While it took everything out of him, Sam had somehow chased Mankey all the way to where it was staying. He breathed in. Just a minute, Cyndaquil. We'll go inside once I'm able to walk again. He set her on the ground, and she nudged at his leg, worried. He did his best to give her a smile, but it honestly took several minutes before he could properly recover. All right, he said once capable again. Here's the plan. Mankey is inside of that house. We can't scare it off. Instead, we have to beat it so I can catch it in a pokeball. The house it had entered looked abandoned. The foliage around it was overgrown, its faint blue paint was peeling, and most of its windows had been covered with boards. Cyndaquil was doing her best to stand tall. The sight of the old building reminded Sam of that one Dewford mansion. Ready, he said. She nodded, doing her best to not shiver. Together, they walked up to the front door, where a broken lock hung on the handle of the front, sliding door. Ominous. Heading inside, the interior was yellowed from age, and a few spider webs sat here and there. From the ceiling, Sam thought he saw something move, but it wasn't the Mankey. It was a green spinnerack that looked deep purple in the darkness. Cyndaquil, he said. At his acknowledgement, Cyndaquil let the flames on her back flare. The wild spinnerack didn't approach further, warded off by the type it was weak to. I saw Mankey enter a window upstairs. It's probably in the attic, Sam said. He briefly checked to make sure Cyndaquil was okay and he sent one last cautious glance to the spinnerack. Satisfied everything was going well, Sam moved to find a route upstairs. While this place had a second floor, it was clear no other Pokémon had made its home here. There was nothing around to leave signs of life, and Sam was once again reminded of that mansion. This place is a lot smaller, though. A string hung from the ceiling in the corner. Sam recognized it as a way to pull down the ladder to the attic. It creaked when he pulled, and dust clouded the air. He coughed. The dust drifted to the ground. Be careful. Stay on guard. Sam picked up Cyndaquil to give her an easier time of heading in first. He followed her immediately after, properly entering the attic. Here, the rafters of the building were exposed, and a few empty cardboard boxes were spread out on their sides. There weren't any pieces of furniture in here like Sam's own attic room, and while he didn't see the Mankey, he did at least see the mess it had made. Pieces of cardboard from torn-up boxes littered the floor, with those and scraps of cloth pushed together to make some sort of bed in the corner. Cores of fruits and miscellaneous seeds were thrown all around onto the ground. On one side of the room, there was a pile of berries obviously stolen from the vendor. Not just that, but there were also a few Pokedoll stuffed toys that resembled Clefairy scattered around as well. One thing that suddenly stood out to Sam was the fact no other Mankey were here. That's strange. I could have sworn Mankey traveled in packs. Cyndaquil let her flames burn to illuminate the room. The windows were opened, but the light they provided only reached so far in. This time around, Sam didn't need to retrieve his flashlight, because all of his and Cyndaquil's practice together had meant she built up her stamina. She could actually maintain her flames for a few minutes without needing to use any moves. Without any excess movement, Sam started to make his way deeper in. He stayed on high alert, constantly looking around, but the eventual encounter didn't come from his side. It came from directly above him. A howl. A screech. Sam froze only for something wet and squishy to hit his face. He gagged almost immediately and bent to hurriedly try to get it off. A half-chewed piece of berry slid onto the ground. It left an uncomfortable residue behind. Man. Key. Man. Key. The Mankey laughed, revealing itself to have hidden behind a thick support beam. Sam scowled and only barely managed to stop himself from calling for an ember. Don't want to burn this place down. Thankfully, though, the Mankey seemed willing to take this challenge on. It hopped down to land on the attic floor across from Cyndaquil, and it laced its fingers together to crack them, implying that this would be an easy match. Yet? You'll realize your mistake before long, Sam said, a growl to his voice. Pointing forward to start the battle the right way, he shouted for Cyndaquil to attack first. Tackle! Cyndaquil charged, and Mankey snickered. Just like what had happened at the fruit stall, it jumped to hop over her attack. Turn and smokescreen. Right into its face. The fighting type seemed more intent on playing around with Cyndaquil rather than unleashing attacks of its own. Because of that, it wasn't ready for when Cyndaquil's flames flared and she coughed a puff of smoke into its face. It screeched in surprise and coughed from the sudden move. This wasn't a cloud, just a small puff, but it was good enough to create a hindering effect. Glad that worked. Though an untested strategy, the impromptu smokescreen was enough to make an opening for Cyndaquil. Sam hurriedly shouted for Ember, and she fired the attack at the Mankey, which was trying to rub the irritants off of its face. The move struck, knocking Mankey to the ground. Blackened marks appeared on its fur from where the attack hit. Now, tackle! Sam shouted. The Mankey looked enraged. This time, when Cyndaquil charged, it didn't jump. It stuck its leg out for a low kick that made her trip. With Cyndaquil having fallen to the ground, Mankey bared its hands to use scratch at her back. She cried out from the damage, but Sam had an idea. Flare your back, he shouted. After all, he had personally experienced the heat of her fire when he picked her up in Granite Cave. Just like Sam ordered, Cyndaquil let her flames come out at full blast, and Mankey recoiled as the heat burned through its scratch. It's weakened. Let's finish it off. Create an opening, and use Leer. Using its primate agility, Mankey leaped through the air to come at Cyndaquil from above. However, its eyes widened and all aggression was lost when a sudden withering glare came out towards Mankey. Instead of letting it land a powerful attack, its leap only served to deliver it right to where Cyndaquil was waiting. Her head slammed into it right under its mouth. Mankey cried out. When it hit the floor, it briefly rolled around in pain before coming to a stop. Motionless, it was clear that Mankey had been rendered unable to battle. Great! And now for the final blow, Sam said. Instead of ordering for one last move, Sam reached into his pack to pull out a Pokeball, the same Pokeball he had brought to catch a ghost type in the mansion, and he threw it forward to let it smack Mankey on the face. It grunted from the impact, but then the ball opened up. Red light consumed the fighting type to bring it into the ball. With a clunk, it landed on the floor and shook as the Mankey tried to escape. One shake. Two shakes. Sam held his breath. In the end, the battle with Cyndaquil had tired it out enough that after the third shake, Mankey settled down, and the Pokeball clicked. Yes! Sam practically roared his cheer. We did it, Cyndaquil! We actually caught a Pokémon! She weakly raised a paw. Seeing that, Sam rushed to pull out his soul potion from his back. She sighed in relief as the spray immediately began healing her wounds. You did absolutely incredible. You're showing great flexibility with your limited moveset. Ember was kept constrained without burning the floor, Smokescreen came out faster than ever, and your Leer? Oh, your Leer. Now that's a move we'll be able to rely on for a long time. Embarrassed, she scratched at her cheek as Sam affectionately rubbed her head. Once he made sure she was taken care of, he went over and picked up the Pokeball that contained Mankey. This was Sam's first capture. It represented a powerful future if he actually managed to get it to evolve. While not a ghost type, it still filled a gap on his team. He just needed to figure out a way to train it, first. Plus, we need to take on some more jobs to ensure I can afford food, and that's going to be a problem with all the competition. Before that, we probably need to head to the Pokémon Center for healing, first. Then I can try to convince Mankey to actually stay and work with us. But, I should probably inform the lady who hired me. I actually want to be paid for this job. Sam smiled at Cyndaquil and scooped her up. Placing her in his hood to rest, he headed back downstairs, still avoiding that spinner rack, and left to report a job well done. According to the stall owner, there was a difference between getting rid of Mankey and capturing it with the promise of a new life. It took a lot of arguing on both Sam and Reedy's parts, but in the end, he still got paid. Chapter 14. Sam rushed back to the Pokémon Center and passed over Mankey for healing. He then went to a free video phone to finally call his mother. However, the second the line connected, he didn't see his mom. Instead, the screen flashed to a close-up shot of gemstone eyes and a sharp-toothed grin. He screamed. Sam fell off his stool. Cyndaquil was thrown into the air from his flailing. His butt hit the ground, hard, and the Sableye on the monitor cackled at his pain. You, Sam hissed. The very same Sableye that had tricked him back in Granite Cave pulled away from the camera. Oh, stop scaring him. You know he didn't deserve that, the voice of Sam's mother said. When Sam managed to climb back up to his seat, he saw the last thing he expected to see, his mother sitting calmly within the Dewford Pokémon Center while Delcatty sat in her lap and while Sableye crouched on a short desk in front of her. To put it lightly, Sam was flabbergasted. I don't understand, he said. Well, turns out we've had a bit of a stalker problem in the past month, she said, chuckling. Sableye here followed you out of the cave, with the two of us none the wiser. I had no idea he was there until you were gone. The shop felt so empty that all the little things he was trying to do to scare us actually stood out for once. What? Sam replied flatly. Indeed. His mother closed her eyes and nodded sagely. Anyway, once I figured out something was afoot, all it took was a teensy-weensy bit of effort on Delcatty's part to find out that this one was there. After, I figured with you gone, I wouldn't mind the extra help, so we convinced Sabai to stick around. His mother spoke in a cheerful tone, as if what she was describing wasn't absolutely insane. The ghost type on the counter next to her shivered, and Delcatty's thin tail whipped out to hit Sabai on the arm, as if in reminder. To be clear, without doing anything special, Delcatty's tail hit Sabai on the arm. Given that Sabai was a ghost type, the basic attack shouldn't have landed in the first place. It was as if Sabai let it happen because it knew that if it didn't, whatever else Delcatty did would be worse. He's actually pretty cheap, too, his mom continued, nonchalantly. Quartz costs less than berries. I've been saving money on meals. Sabai grinned at Sam. The expression on its face had not changed, but it somehow looked more smug than before. In a way, its new life with Sam's mother was almost like a trade. Sabai would get easy meals, and all it had to do was volunteer at the bookstore. But then again, Sabai had been the one to lure Sam into an extremely dangerous situation. He had a feeling that his mother wouldn't let that go scot-free. So you made it to Olivine. How is everything there? Sam was more than willing to move on, and he began to excitedly explain everything that had happened. He talked about encountering Xavier on the ship, meeting Reedy and her offer of a place to stay, signing up for a surprise tournament and his acquisition of a proper trainer ID, and then most recently. I managed to catch my first Pokémon. It's a Mankey, not a ghost type, but, well, eventually, you know. He coughed into his hand, and his mother seemed to be able to put two and two together. Do you have any advice? She hummed. Absent-mindedly, she pet Delcatty in her lap. It's been ages since I've properly caught a Pokémon, she said, not even blinking at the Sabai sitting in front of her. I think it's important to remember that just because you caught Mankey, Mankey isn't fully on your team. What do you mean? Pokeballs catch Pokémon, but they don't forcefully befriend Pokémon, his mother explained. Even luxury balls, which are said to promote friendship, only manage to do that by being luxuriously comfortable. Pokeballs don't stop Pokémon from running away when you aren't looking, and Pokémon centers run wellness checks to make sure Pokémon actually like being with their trainers. You need to give Mankey a proper reason to be on your team, otherwise, it might want to run away. So, maybe talk to it and bring up the idea of food, company, a safe way to get stronger. She trailed off, implying that Sam would need to figure out a convincing argument on his own. I get it. Thank you, Mom, he said. No problem, sweetie. Just remember, everyone here loves you. The same to you too, Cyndaquil. I can tell you're getting strong, she said. Cyndaquil squeaked fondly, and his mother smiled back. I love you, too, Sam said, though he did try to send Sabai a side-eye through the screen. For now, I think I need to go. Nurse Joy has just about finished healing up Mankey. One last exchange of goodbyes with his mom later, and Sam hung up the phone and stepped away. These public video phones didn't have much in the way of privacy, only plastic dividers to keep them separate from one another. So, when Sam turned around, he jumped when he saw someone had listened in. Reedy stood there, making kissy faces at him. He groaned and moved past her, pretending not to have seen. Come on, Cyndaquil. We have a potential new team member to go pick up, he said. Reedy lingered nearby, regardless. Given that Mankey was Sam's first real capture, the nurse gave Sam a speech not too dissimilar to what his mother had just told him. One-and-done captures weren't a thing. The relationship between Pokémon and trainer was crucial. Yet, she didn't stop there. She went on to praise Professor Oak, even going as far as to recommend some of his books. Sam hid it, but he purposefully ignored her. While those relationships were the core of Professor Oak's research, he wasn't a fan of the man considering that the invention of the electronic Pokédex was hurting his mother's business. Thank you. I'll keep what you said in mind, Sam lied. I hope so. You better treat Mankey properly, came the nurse's reply. Sam nodded at her once before skipping off to a side glass door. It opened up automatically to let Sam step out into the Pokémon Center's back, where several basic battlefields were set up. There were 3 of them total out here, with 2 of them occupied by battles actively taking place. The last was shared by a few sets of trainers practicing with their teams, with plenty of empty space for Sam to claim and train in. Alright, Cyndaquil. Let's give a warm welcome to Mankey. And I'll help. Reedy added from behind Sam. Sam sent her a glance only to see her grinning with Teddy Ursa puffed up at her side. He shook his head, a little amused at the reaction. Honestly, he was excited, too. Tossing forward the Pokeball, the two halves of the device opened up to let red light pour out onto the battlefield floor. There, it coalesced into the form of Mankey. The Pokémon stretched its arms, as if just waking up from a nap, before freezing when it noticed Sam standing so close nearby. Hello. Sam said cheerfully. Mankey immediately jumped back and drew up its hands, preparing to strike if pressed. Wait. We're not going to fight you. I know we battled, but I captured you and took you to a Pokémon Center for a reason. Sam said. Looking over the fighting type, it was in much better shape than before. The spots where Cyndaquil attacked were healed, with the nurse going as far as to clean lingering soot off its fur. Not just that, but Mankey looked to have been washed, too. Its hair was less coarse and significantly more fluffy. In fact, it had gone from a slight tan color to a color that was mostly white. I'll need to start buying shampoo, Sam thought, making a mental note. As a fire type, Cyndaquil was averse to water. She instead burned any dirt off of her, so all Sam had to do was brush her short fur to keep her in good shape. Alright. I'll be up front with you, I want you to properly join my team, Sam said. We're new at this, but you know from experience that we can fight. Cyndaquil and I have dreams to become some of the strongest trainers around, and we want you to join us. Mankey snorted, its pig nose twitching. After all, practically every trainer had that dream. Sam sighed and rubbed his head. Even though he hadn't convinced it, Mankey had at least lowered its hands and stopped behaving so aggressively. He took a look around to see that all the other trainers here were too occupied with their own teams to pay any attention to them. As for Reedy, she was patiently yet excitedly waiting off to the side, ready to jump in whenever Sam would let her. He needed Mankey to stay on his team. It had already demonstrated incredible agility, and with enough work together, it could become a powerful Annihilape. Time to pull out the big guns, then. Come on. I think I have a way to convince you. It involves a secret about our training, so Reedy. A secret? Can't I come? She looked up at him with the biggest puppy dog eyes she could muster. To make matters worse, Teddy Ursa mimicked her to look even more incredibly cute at her side. Sam immediately flinched back, weak to this devastating blow. Sorry. But it's an advantage I don't want others to have. Every trainer has to have their secrets, yet, he quickly replied. Reedy's look faded, and she made an exaggerated show of snapping her fingers as if she had just been caught. Aw man. Fine. But you'll eventually tell me, right? I mean, you'll eventually see the results if we can pull it off, Sam said. She grinned at that and moved off to practice with Teddy Ursa. It looked like she was having her Pokémon almost shadow box, except the little bear was just scratching at the air. She cheered him on while Sam split off, encouraging Mankey to follow him to have a conversation out of view, under a tree. From the way it was looking at him, Sam felt confident that all this talk about secrets caught its curiosity. So, Sam started, kneeling down to better speak on level with the Pokémon. Since I want you on the team, I'm going to show you my trust by revealing a secret no one else knows. He went ahead to take the new Pokédex out of his pack. Mankey crossed its arms and scoffed when it saw the secret was just a book. Now, hold on. Don't judge a book by its cover. This thing is incredible, and it's filled with tips no one else can learn. He flipped to the entry on Mankey. For starters, did you know that you can have Anger Point as an ability? Most people think Mankey can only train Vital Spirit, which prevents you from being put to sleep, but Anger Point would let you maximize your physical attack whenever an opponent lands a critical blow. The fighting type turned away, acting like it was unconvinced. But, the ears on its head remained pointed towards Sam. Sam hummed as if he had to search for more pertinent information, but he already knew exactly what to say. You know, this also lists a pretty extensive potential moveset. Cross Chop. Close Combat. Outrage. Bet you didn't know you could learn those moves, hey. Mankey didn't shift in the slightest, continuing to pretend to be unimpressed. That changed when Sam snapped the book shut, the sound causing it to jump. When it thrust its fists down and stomped a foot unhappily, Sam just replied with a grin. You sure about that? What if I told you I wanted to assemble a team of ghost types? The question was almost a non sequitur, and it caught Mankey off guard enough that it paused where it was about to rage. It glanced at Cyndaquil. It glanced at the book. Then, it held up its own hands to look at them, and if suddenly putting the pieces together, it snapped its gaze to Sam. There's an evolution past Primeape, he said bluntly. An evolution only I know. I wanted to catch you not just because of that, but because I saw your potential with how you could move. You have incredible agility and senses that I know we can hone together. And we'll have this book to guide us. With a bit of work, we can get you to evolve, and then once you're a Primeape. Sam shook his head as if it were obvious, and then he held out his hand. I can make you strong, Mankey. What do you think about joining my team? It hesitated for a second. It didn't grab Sam's hand right away. It seemed to stare at him, trying to take him in and gather his measure. Key, it grunted. Sam glanced at Cyndaquil for translation. She held up a paw and wiggled it. So, Mankey is still a little unsure. Recognizing he just needed one more strike to finish it off, Sam opened up the book once more and flipped deep in. Unfortunately, Mankey's final evolution wasn't listed with the rest of his evolutionary line, but it was instead included over 900 entries in. But once he found it, he turned the book around to show Mankey what its true final form looked like. There, Annilope was detailed, and Mankey went stiff with shock. A darkened body. Eyes locked into permanent rage. Hair that drifted off into ghostly wisps. Annilope didn't just use its anger as a weapon, it was a species that absolutely mastered it. Mankey stared at the drawing for a long time, not looking at any specific detail, but memorizing it as a whole. It slowly lifted up a hand to cautiously touch the book, wanting to check that, yes, the book was real, but Sam's first instinct was to pull the book away. However, he was able to suppress that reaction to let Mankey touch it, demonstrating a level of trust. Its fingers hovered over the page before pressing down. It grunted slightly, as if shocked it could actually feel the paper, then dragged his hand down to reveal the drawing once again. It stared, motionless. For a second, Sam thought Mankey was about to back off in disbelief. But, it drew back its hand and clenched it into a fist. Mankey, it declared, eyes hard with determination. Great. Sam grabbed that very hand and shook it up and down happily. Welcome to the team, Mankey, he said excitedly. I'll make you strong. Don't worry, we're going to go places. All of us. We're going to be an undefeatable ghost-type team. Mankey was a little dazed, but it still nodded along. It made a few okay noises that were much more cheerful than before. From there, with Mankey having properly joined, Sam went ahead to flip back to the actual entry on Mankey's species and read off as much information as he could. Mankey listened intently, taking in the vast potential that he detailed, yet Sam himself was already starting to put together a training plan in his head. After all, with two different team members, casual practice wasn't going to cut it. If he wanted to do well in the rapidly approaching tournament, Sam needed to put both time and serious effort into his life as a Pokémon trainer. Chapter 15. Cyndaquil flared her flames, illuminating the alley with a flickering light. She said her name in challenge, and 3 Rattata exited a chute-through hole in a dumpster to quickly surround her. Get ready, Mankey, Sam said. We're jumping in if needed. Sam was poised to jump. Mankey was already tensing his legs. Half the purpose of this fight was to give Cyndaquil a chance to try something on her own, but even though she was the one to insist on it, Sam couldn't help but to feel nervous for his friend. Her head flicked around as the 3 Rattata circled her. She was doing her best to keep an eye on all of them, but that was hard to do when they kept angling to get behind her. They snapped at her and bared their teeth. Outside of an occasional shift to keep an eye on them, Cyndaquil was utterly still, preparing with all of her focus. Then, a twitch. One of the Rattata lunged forward. Sam reacted right away. At the top of his lungs, he shouted, "Now!" Fire exploded out from Cyndaquil's back. Flames licked up the sides of her mouth. The attacking Rattata skidded to a halt, intimidated by the sight of the rising flames. This wasn't Ember, but a new move altogether. As if preparing for a tackle, Cyndaquil ducked her head down and then pushed forward off the ground. Except, she wasn't trying for a basic slam, she was trying to get her flames to completely surround her. Her body rolled forward as her back blazed bright, but as so much of her focus was being spent on her fire, the movement only came out as a sweltering somersault. Though still intimidating, it was nowhere near the outcome she wanted. For this to be an attack, Cyndaquil needed to roll at a speed equal to or faster than running, and she needed to let her flames completely encompass her form. Still, the fire put the three Rattata on guard, and they didn't lunge for an attack again, choosing to see what Cyndaquil would do next. Sam could feel the heat of her flames from where he was crouched several feet away, but seeing the disappointed expression on her face, he went ahead to give a signal to Mankey. "You can help her now," he said. Mankey screeched. The primate leaped forward. Excited at the chance for a fight, he jabbed with the side of his hands to land a karate chop against a Rattata that didn't turn to face him fast enough. The super effective move was enough to convince it that sticking around would mean a losing fight, and it scampered away while squeaking for its two friends to follow. They did. Mankey slumped disappointedly, and Sam stood up, straining his ears. In the distance, he kept track of the faint sound of the Pokémon's panicked footsteps rushing down the street until they suddenly vanished with a splash. He took that as a sign that the trio had disappeared into the sewers, which was what he wanted to hear. "All right. So Flame Wheel's a no-go for now," he said. Cyndaquil's head drooped, and Sam walked over to pat and console her. Mankey gave her a thumbs up, but he looked a little annoyed there hadn't been more to a fight. "I know that Pokémon grow in stressful situations, but man, my heart is pounding," Sam said, trying to improve her mood. "We've only managed to get so much training in, but that was 3 Rattata. Sure, we didn't directly beat them, but we scared them off, which means we've achieved something that makes us scary." He smiled at his Pokémon. Cyndaquil shook her head, a little exasperated as she recognized what Sam was doing. Still, it was working, as she was no longer as focused on her failure to learn a new move as before. "Now, come on. This is about to earn us some money. Who wants to help me nail the board?" Mankey held up a plank as Sam hammered the nails to keep it in place. The hole that allowed the Rattata to live in the dumpster was properly sealed, completing the job Sam was hired to do. The Pokemart employee that hired Sam wouldn't need to worry every time he got close to the dumpster, and the plank was obvious enough that the employee would be able to see any teeth marks if the Rattata tried to return. A few minutes later, after collecting the payment from the apron-wearing man, Sam counted his new total sum. To his name, he had $60. That was down from $100 thanks to the sheer cost of Pokemon food. Over the past few days, he had been purchasing supplies. After all, he refused to have a woman as kind as Reedy's aunt spend her hard-earned money to feed Sam and his team. His Pokémon were his responsibility, not hers. Though, she did still cook. He was just the one to purchase and supply any ingredients. The Pokémon Center updates the job boards twice a day, once in the morning and once 2 hours past noon. We have a few hours to spare until the next update, so maybe we should squeeze in a bit more practice?" Sam asked. Mankey was in agreement. If there was anything Sam could tell from the monkey Pokémon, it was that Mankey absolutely wanted to become an Annihilape. Cyndaquil, though, she just let loose a chirping sigh from within Sam's hood. The failure to figure out Flame Wheel was still getting to her. "You'll get it in the future," he said, trying to reassure her. Even with that declaration, Sam couldn't help but feel unsure how to continue his team's training. Repeatedly using moves to improve them helped, and so did the exercises that built up his team's bodies. Still, despite being a trainer, he was worried he wasn't doing anything specific enough to actually make a difference with his team. That was one of the reasons he had been so focused on doing jobs. Sam didn't just want to make money, but the battles and physical labor that came from the work helped vary his team's practice. However, while the small flow of income was nice, Olivine was simply too crowded to give him the chance to find much decent work. Over the past few days, he'd only been able to take on jobs to fight off 2 different wild Pokémon and help one man load up a moving truck. His funds were slowly dwindling. At least, Sam hoped that the upcoming tournament would let him turn that around. "We just have to win, first. 2 days left until the preliminary matches. 2 days left to train." Sam's thoughts on his current situation faded away as he became wholly focused on building up his current Pokémon. "We'll definitely have the usual round of exercise for Cyndaquil, but maybe we'll include some rolling practice to help you with Flame Wheel?" Sam asked, idly walking down an Olivine street with no major destination in mind. "Mankey, I'm still not sure what to do for you. I mean, I think shadowboxing is a thing, right? Maybe we can ask someone with a rock-type Pokémon to make some boulders for you to attack. Cyndaquil's practice was based on what they had done with his mother, so it involved a continuous build-up of her basics. Mankey's practice, however, Sam wasn't as confident about. The monkey Pokémon was a great physical attacker. He already knew fighting-type moves like low kick and karate chop, but Mankey as a species weren't great at taking hits. Mankey had good agility at least, which meant he could more easily avoid attacks in fights. His stamina was different, but Sam wasn't sure how to train physical defense without directly attacking his Pokémon, something he didn't want to do. For all of his claims to be a trainer, Sam was feeling a decent chunk of self-doubt. Are my Pokémon actually improving? Should I try to figure out other training techniques? Honestly, Sam was starting to regret not paying more attention to all of the different fighting-type specialists back in Dewford. What if Sam let his words drift off as he turned his gaze to the various stores that lined the street. Reedy wasn't around. She was currently training with Teddy Ursa on her own, and Sam didn't have any specific goal. What if we got a nice lunch? It wouldn't be the training he mentioned, and the act would be a blow to his already dwindling wallet, but Sam was willing to take that hit if it meant getting closer to Mankey. Learning more about his newest team member might assist with coming up with a training plan. Cyndaquil, he knew well, but Mankey still felt like an enigma. Glancing down to where Mankey hopped along at his side and feeling the weight of Cyndaquil in his hood, Sam nodded his head to reaffirm his decision. Yeah. Let's get a nice lunch. It would cheer up Cyndaquil while helping his aforementioned worries with Mankey. Besides, Mankey's eyes had already gone unfocused, and saliva was dripping from his fur-covered mouth. Sam laughed. I can add that to what I know about him. Mankey definitely likes to eat. I'll see if we can find a restaurant that allows people to sit with their Pokémon, Sam said. It'd be nice to have a decent break. He wasn't in downtown Olivine, but a portion of the city where the buildings were small yet filled with businesses. Most had displays advertising specific products, clothes, specialized tools, custom art, comic books, but he focused on what restaurants he could find. His eyes schemed over most of the options here. As a port city, there was a surprising selection of different types of food. Ramen, sushi, and other common indigo meals were present as expected. There were also a few places that advertised foreign food, namely meals based on the diets of people in Hone and Sinnoh. He was forced to pass up most places since he couldn't afford too large of a drain on his finances, and by the end of it, he was almost ready to give up and buy some pre-made meals for an impromptu picnic in a park. However, Sam almost froze when he saw a restaurant that looked completely out of place. An imitation Calagian place? Hey! Mentions of other regions were almost impossible to find. A restaurant that boasted an attempt to mimic Kalos was not just incredibly rare, it was practically unheard. That had already gathered his interest, but what drew him to it even more were the advertisements posted on its front that showed off just how cheap its food was. Mankey ran ahead of him as Sam walked through the open front doors. He didn't need to ask his team if they were interested, as Mankey was happy with anything, and Cyndaquil trusted Sam enough to follow along with whatever he said. The layout was about as expected of most restaurants here, a long counter for chefs to stand behind with several tables and sets pressed against the walls. Photos and postcards of Kalos itself hung on the walls, and the tables were covered with white tablecloths, giving the place a fancier than usual feel. Except, it was empty. There was absolutely no one else here. Hello, he called out. A bell rang as he passed through the front door, but no one came out to help him right away. Every single table was empty, and despite all the silverware already set out, there were no customers making use of them. Sam actually turned around to check that he had correctly read the sign that stated this place was open. He did. It was just that empty. We're here. Give us a moment, a voice eventually called out. He heard the sound of rushing footsteps and the rustle of cloth as, a few seconds later, a woman with a bob of brown hair burst through a door that led to the back. She was dressed in a waiter's outfit that was as stereotypical as it went. It was complete with a black vest, white cuffs, and perfectly clean dress shoes. A customer. Would you like help finding a table? She said, moving to approach Sam. Sam glanced around at the empty room once more. Sure, he said. She smiled excitedly at him and led him to a spot only a few feet away. His Pokémon followed and either hopped up or were placed into chairs of their own. The waitress didn't even blink at their presence. A sign outside had advertised this place as Pokémon friendly, after all. I'm Matilda. I'll be your server today. What do you want to order? She asked, placing down laminated menus in front of Sam. He looked at the menus, then he looked up at her. Mankey had already picked his up, except the Pokémon couldn't read. Could we have a moment to decide? Sam asked. She blushed. Of course. She then scurried off to subtly watch him from the door she had just left from. He ignored her constant stare as he turned back to his team. Thankfully, the menus here listed meals with both pictures and text. It allowed both trainer and Pokémon to figure out what to choose, and Sam helped his team make their decisions. He and Mankey both chose bowls of soup that were enormous but somehow cheap, and Cyndaquil just wanted a small salad for herself. Unfortunately, even with this place's incredibly reduced prices, anything too fancy was still firmly outside of Sam's budget. Only a minute later, Sam called the waitress back and placed everyone's order. Everyone got drinks water, because it was cheap, and as she left the room, Sam turned to Mankey, taking advantage of the restaurant's privacy while also going through with one of the primary reasons he had come here. So, Mankey. I know we've been working together a lot, but we haven't really talked. Sam felt a little awkward. He had been with Cyndaquil for years, so he wasn't sure how to go through with this. He ended up just stating it bluntly. I want to learn more about you. What do you want to achieve, for starters? Mankey was rotating the menu around in his hands, but the Pokémon smacked it against the table to set it down when Sam asked his question. The primate's eyes wandered off and went unfocused in thought as he rocked his head back and forth. Eventually, Mankey grunted and flexed his arms. Strength, Sam translated. Ah, yeah. Sam rubbed the side of his head awkwardly. I guess that makes sense. I mean, we talked about reaching your final evolution. Then, I guess my question is, why do you want to get stronger? He almost missed it, but he caught Mankey stiffening ever so slightly in response to the question. Mankey himself, however, brushed past it and simply nodded and grunted his name as if to emphasize his previous point. So, you want to get stronger, just for the sake of it? Sam asked. Mankey nodded and pointed at Sam to imply that was exactly right. Except, Sam knew that wasn't right. There was something else there. Mankey had frozen for an instant, after all. If I think back to how we found him. But is that really the truth? What about how we found you completely on your own? He asked. This time, Mankey actually froze. His red eyes darted around, as if he was trying to think of an excuse. Eventually, he looked away, crossing his long arms, and Sam grimaced. Can I ask you to talk about it? Please? Sam asked, leaning forward. I'm your trainer. I want to get to know you better. Your goals are our goals, right? Mankey still didn't meet Sam's eyes. Sam stared, trying to put as much sincerity into body language as he could. Eventually, Mankey slumped in defeat. The Pokémon made a show of pointing away and going through a few other motions. It took Sam looking at Cyndaquil for body language translation to understand what the monkey meant. So. Later. You'll tell me, later, Sam said. Mankey excitedly nodded, satisfied with Sam's reaction. All right, Sam said. He nodded once to affirm his own decision. I'll offer my trust and I won't bring up the subject until later. I know that there's definitely something about how you were your own, but you don't want to speak about it until you're stronger. Were you caught and brought to this city? Did someone trick you here? No, wait. Don't answer those questions. Ugh, sorry. I always want to learn more. Force of habit, I guess. Books are usually explicit about what information they contain. At least, Mankey did answer those two questions, likely giving Sam a show of trust as well. He adamantly shook his head no for both, as if to emphasize that he had never been caught or involved with another trainer. Rather, Sam got the sense that the Pokémon had somehow been separated from his pack, but he didn't want to speak about it just yet. I'm happy Mankey gave me something. This was a good decision. And if he wants strength, maybe we focus on power when training? Sam hummed and looked over the menu again while thinking about how he wanted to train his team. The food came out a short while later, giving everyone their expected meals. Sam and Cyndaquil started to eat, but Mankey slurped down his entire bowl of soup within seconds before turning to Sam and holding out the empty bowl, asking for more. Sam stared at the monkey, both dumbstruck and impressed by just how gluttonous he was. You know what? Sure. Here. He pushed his soup over, and Mankey said his name excitedly before slurping it down just as fast. Sam half regretted giving away his lunch, but if his Pokémon was happy, he was happy. He just had to ignore how his stomach was currently rumbling. He didn't expect a voice to speak up behind him, though. I can bring you another bowl, if you'd like, the waitress exclaimed. Sam almost jumped right out of his chair when she spoke. He had completely forgotten she was here. The room was so empty and so lacking other people that he'd taken having the space for himself for granted. We're okay, he said a little too loudly. Oh. All right, came her reply. She didn't leave, choosing to silently stand behind him a short distance away, visibly ready to assist if needed. Are you okay? Sam asked. He was a little unnerved by her constant presence. The waitress's smile wavered. Her eyes flicked around the empty room. Eventually, she let out a depressed groan and collapsed into a nearby chair, much to Sam's utter bewilderment. No one wants Calogion food, she cried. They're too focused on Johto. But Kalos is such a beautiful country. Why doesn't anyone at least try? Her face twisted up in distress, and Sam uncomfortably shifted around in his chair. He was 14. He was focused on becoming a Pokémon trainer. Helping someone who looked to be a decade older than him was decidedly not in his wheelhouse. Maybe people don't realize, he offered. That's why I opened this restaurant with my dad. I wanted to introduce Kalos to the region. She sniffed. The awkwardness of the situation was almost painful. Cyndaquil stopped eating to poke at her half-eaten salad. Mankey held out the second empty bowl to ask for even more. Maybe. You know, I really think people just don't think about Kalos, Sam said. I doubt anyone even knows any of its native Pokémon. All of the Pokédexes I've read were based on local species. I mean, can you even name any Calogion Pokémon? She scoffed as if Sam had asked an easy question. Yeah, easy, she said. There's Chespin, Fennekin, and Froakie as their starters. Then there's also Fletchling and Espar, too. Sam blinked. Hey. I actually think you know more foreign species than anyone in Johto, Sam said. The waitress suddenly shot up in her seat. Wait, you know them, too. Sam scratched at his cheek and debated how much to reveal. My mom owns a bookstore, he settled on. We get a lot of books. Sometimes I learn about foreign Pokémon, so what you said wasn't too unfamiliar. That was a half-truth. He had learned of a handful of foreign Pokémon before obtaining the new Pokédex. Mentions of them were extremely rare and generally focused on Unova, but it was at least possible to figure out one or two Calogion Pokémon names. As for what he had learned out of the new Pokédex, it still wasn't much. Most of what he read was focused around Johto and Kanto. Sure, when he saw an occasional new evolution, he would glance over it, but the new Pokédex was so dense that he had only barely skimmed the later parts. Even then, he tended to focus on the ghost types more often than not. So you're a fellow connoisseur, the waitress whispered, completely missing how Sam said he barely knew anything. And I don't mean a Pokémon connoisseur, but someone who's actually put time and research in. Oh, I've never met anyone else who's looked into Kalos. Or even anyone who can identify its species. She was grinning wildly, now. Sam uncomfortably cleared his throat. Again, I don't really know that much, but it's at least part of the reason I entered this restaurant in the first place. That, and the prices. I just haven't had a reason to research Calogion Pokémon since they can't be found here. But they can, the waitress said. Sam froze. I mean, some of them, at least, she continued. None of its more physical species, but some supposedly foreign Pokémon can appear way off route and aren't limited to any one region. What do you mean? Sam asked. The possibility was enthralling. He had only wanted to get lunch, but now his entire worldview was being shaken. Okay. So, like, there are Pokémon species that aren't as, well, I'll call them as physical as others, she said. A lot of those species can appear in certain circumstances, regardless of wherever they are. The most famous example is Bergmite. Bergmite are generally regarded as a Calogion Pokémon, but they can be found high up in mountains, and I'm pretty sure they were in Sinnoh in the past. Bergmite, Sam repeated. That's a nice type. She nodded. She looked extremely proud he had recognized it. Yup. They're pretty cool. I think those kinds of conditions apply to ghost types, too. Sam sat up straighter in his chair, making sure to properly look Matilda in the eye. Can you give any examples? He asked. She leaned over and unconsciously tugged at her hair in thought before being able to bring up any specific species. I think Phantom can occasionally appear in deep forests around the globe, and Hunch sometimes possesses old swords. Johto is old enough that I wouldn't be surprised if you are able to find either of them. Alternatively, ocean-based water types drift from region to region, but those are water types, not ghosts. Sam's mind raced a mile a minute. The new Pokédex only lists roots and caves as potential habitats. She's talking about finding other species off-route. Routes between cities tended to be patrolled by Pokémon Rangers to keep them safe, and as a result, tougher wild Pokémon usually stayed away. It was generally agreed that the Pokémon that lingered on routes were amenable to being caught but tended to be weaker in exchange. Most Pokémon-based discoveries centered around safe routes, but so much of the globe went unexplored that new, off-route discoveries were being made all the time. But then, why is the new Pokédex so limited? I mean, if it contains over 1,000 Pokémon, it should at least have some information on when a species can be found off-route, right? He had too many questions that needed to be answered. Sam shook his head to try to snap out of it. Thank you, he said, genuinely meaning it. I think we're just about done eating, though. Can we pay? The waitress blinked. Oh, don't worry about it, she said. Just make me a promise that if you do find any otherwise Calogion Pokémon, you'll bring them here to show me, right? Right. Sam said. He wasn't going to pass up a free meal, nor was he going to let someone who had been so helpful down. He went on to thank her and helped his Pokémon off their chairs. The salad had been too much for Cyndaquil to finish, but she was at least feeling better now. Mankey was a bit different. The second he hit the floor, he clutched his stomach and grumbled. Ate too much, hey? Sam asked, amused. The primate tried to wave Sam away, but he was now wobbling when he walked. Thanking the waitress one last time and leaving the restaurant, Sam now had a lot more thoughts on his mind. Foreign Pokémon in Johto. Off-route areas holding alternate species. How many different ghost types can I find? How many options are out there? The future was filled with potential, but once again, Sam had to focus on the present. Whatever mysteries appeared down the line would need to be put off. For now, he had a beginner's tournament to worry about, and he had a team of Pokémon that needed to be trained. Chapter 16. Sam did his best to train, he really did. Except, on his own, he didn't have his mother's guidance or Delcatty to face in spars. Taking jobs gave him ways to train and earn a bit of money as he did, but the few he managed to snatch away from the crowds tended to be manual labor or scaring away weak wild Pokémon. He tried to battle the occasional trainer, too, but he had the same problem in that most trainers as inexperienced as him were too intimidated by Cyndaquil to actually fight. As for Reedy, she was adamant that there would be no contact between them. It wasn't that she was trying to keep him away, but when Sam had mentioned keeping his training a secret back when he was properly recruiting Mankey, she had become enchanted with doing the same with her own practice with Teddy Ursa. Was Sam prepared? Well, to answer that question, he would reply with one word. Maybe. Cyndaquil was in a solid state, though she didn't have a handle on Flame Wheel. As for Mankey, he was still a new capture, but his agility could give him an edge in battle. Keeping all of that in mind, Sam headed over to where the preliminary battles would take place that day. The number of competitors would be narrowed down to only 32, with the applying Pokémon trainers dividing themselves up between all of the different Pokémon centers in Olivine City. Sam was assigned to the same Pokémon center he had registered at. He went to the main Pokémon Center in the middle of downtown. Reedy, though, was going elsewhere, so he went to participate in these battles alone. Surprisingly, when he entered inside, it was slightly less packed today, with the room having plenty of space to loiter around. However, Sam soon learned why, as after following a nurse's directions to a room deeper in, he saw where most of the trainers had gone. This place wasn't just a Pokémon Center, it was an entire facility. Stepping past a set of double doors, he entered a room with a 2x2 grid of battlefields. Stands lined its sides, and trainers filled those stands. There were trainers of his age, trainers years older, and even a handful that almost seemed too young to be here. He couldn't stop his amazed intake of breath. This place was ridiculous. And this is only to determine who's actually competing, he mumbled. The room was solely for the preliminaries. Heart thrumming with excitement, he climbed the steps up to the stands to take a seat and watch the proceedings. It didn't take much longer for the last stragglers to file in and for someone to step into the center of the room. "Hello everyone. Thanks for showing up," a pink-haired nurse said into a mic set up on the ground floor. "The plan for narrowing down our challengers is simple. If you look behind me, we have a system set up for randomizing matches. Your names and pictures will be pulled up alongside an opponent, and you need to win your fight to continue. Today's matches will be double elimination, lose 2 battles and you're out. Other than that, I wish everyone luck. Our first matched pairs will appear shortly." Sam gripped his hands together. He eyed the board with all his focus. "With how many people are in this room, the odds are in my favor to not go first. And if I'm not first, I'll be able to scout out everyone who." Match 3, Samuel Greyson vs Joe Young. Sam took one look at the board and let out a long, drawn-out sigh. Truth be told, with 4 matches taking place at once, the odds of being in the first set weren't impossible, just unlikely. At least, there was a bright side to this. Being in this first set meant people wouldn't know what to expect from him in these matches. Then again, the same is true for my opponent. Sam moved back downstairs, despite having just sat down. Trainers positioned themselves on the battlefields to face their foes, and volunteers moved to serve as referees on the sidelines. The boy facing Sam was young, likely, he was one of the youngest people here. No more than 10 or 11, he wore a bright yellow shirt with a pair of shorts that looked comfortable and easy to wear. "You aren't beating me. My Rattata is the best Rattata out there," the boy shouted. Sam might have only been 14, but he felt the difference in age now more than ever. "Send out your Pokémon," the referee said once Sam and the boy had taken up their positions in their respective trainer box. "Cyndaquil. Rattata." A few murmurs in the audience broke out when Sam revealed his starter Pokémon, but not too many as there were still 3 other matches going on. "Begin," the referee shouted. Both boys yelled their own commands. "Ember. Quick attack." Cyndaquil's flames burned bright as the small, purple rat that was her opponent dashed across the ground. Its quick attack brought it right to her, but unfortunately for it, that meant Cyndaquil could attack that much easier. The full force of Ember blasted it from only inches away. "Rattata," its trainer cried out in worry. "Now, tackle," Sam said, capitalizing on how Rattata recoiled from the damage. Cyndaquil lunged. Her head smashed into Rattata's side, and it was knocked back. After that impact, it sprawled out across the ground, completely unconscious. Rattata is unable to battle. Cyndaquil is the winner. "Hey!" Sam blinked. "Wait. That's it." Cyndaquil only used 2 of her moves. The boy looked like he wanted to cry as his Pokémon disappeared into a flash of red light. He at least gave Sam a respectful nod before rushing back off to the stands. Then, just like that, the next set of trainers started to head downstairs to claim Sam's spot. Sam made sure to watch carefully at the matches that came after his. Each was similar one-on-one matches between low-level Pokémon. Except, there's something to be said about the quality here, hey? An Oddish relied too much on its draining moves and struggled to land a decisive blow that would finish off its opponent. A Pidgey spammed gusts at its grounded opponent, but its aim was off. A Caterpie successfully trapped its opponent within a string-shot web, but now it couldn't approach its flailing opponent without getting trapped itself. Sam hadn't been in a tournament before. Heck, the most he usually saw of tournaments were only the finals that were streamed on TV or of recordings posted online. This was the first time he'd ever been someone participating in one, so this was the first time he'd actually seen behind the scenes. There wasn't anyone who was prevented from signing up, anyone could compete as long as they were a beginning trainer. Given that, Sam stood up and leaned against the stand's railing to better eye a Mariup that was somehow incapable of using electric-type moves. No wonder these preliminary matches are taking place. They're trying to make sure only the strongest of beginners get through. This is to separate the wheat from the chaff. His comment got him a side-eye from a trainer on a nearby seat, but Sam didn't pay them any mind. "I guess it makes sense. Hey! Most people who go on their journey don't plan on making it to the end, they just want to see how many gyms they can beat. Outside of them, there are people who actually want to spend their life as Pokémon trainers. Those are the people who are doing well in these matches." Sam was a novice, yes, but he had spent a month practicing under his mother in the past week of his life training. How many people here had only a single Pokémon caught in the past few weeks? How many people here had been in only 1 or 2 battles before this? As Sam watched, someone else stepped up. She had long blue hair that draped around her shoulders. Match between Eliza and Tony, begin, the referee called out. Under Eliza's command was a Slowpoke, of all things, and she was facing off against a Pikachu. The electric type's trainer grinned and pointed forward at Eliza's Pokémon. Easy win. Use Thunder Shock. The Pikachu sparked with electricity and charged, intent on releasing all of that energy in a super effective attack against the water type. It reached Slowpoke within seconds, yet Eliza did nothing. She brought up a fist to settle her chin on, attempting to project an aura of calm despite how her eyes nervously flicked about. She mumbled something, but Sam was too far away to hear what she said. Pikachu suddenly locked up, stumbled, and its Thunder Shock failed. What? Its trainer said in shock. A second later, Slowpoke's eyes glowed, and a confusion sent Pikachu crumpling to the floor. A psychic blue aura outlined the electric type before finishing it off. Pikachu was unable to battle. Slowpoke is the winner. The blue-haired trainer cheered and happily returned her Pokémon. Her opponent returned his and stormed off, grumbling. She's definitely going to become a threat down the line, Sam mumbled. Reedy said something like all of the tournament's finalists have high odds of making it to the conference, right? He glanced around to make sure no one was watching him before pulling out the new Pokédex. He flipped to the entry on Slowpoke to figure out the move it used. Disable. It cancelled Pikachu's attack before it could land. Sam made note that Eliza was someone to watch out for. Trainers came and went, showing off either impressive skills or a surprising lack of. Although, there were still others who slotted well in between. Sam's second match was against a Pidgey, and he used Cyndaquil again for this match. The bird Pokémon tried to pin her down with gust, but a few ranged embers prevented it from positioning itself in the air. Eventually, its trainer called out for Pidgey to dive for a quick attack, but Aleer stalled it for long enough for a tackle to finish it off. Second match down. Battles continued throughout the day, and Sam continued to watch everyone with intense focus, and he had other matches himself. 2 more came and went, and this time around, he continued to use Cyndaquil. It wasn't that he was avoiding Mankey, it was just that he knew she was stronger. After witnessing some of the other trainers here, Sam didn't want to risk sending out a Pokémon with less experience against a tough opponent. Except, things changed in his 5th battle. A Machop with bulging muscles and a personality to match rushed Cyndaquil before she could begin any attempts to keep away. She tried to ward it off with Ember, but her attack failed when its karate chop smashed into her stomach. Leer! Sam shouted. She glared at it, and it did waver for a moment. However, all the move did was open up its defenses, which wasn't enough to stop further attacks. Low kick into seismic toss, Machop's trainer ordered. The Pokémon swept out a leg, tripping Cyndaquil where she stood. She hit the ground and exhaled from the impact. The flames on her back flickered and petered out. While still conscious, she had thrown her everything into winning the previous matches. Now, she was paying the cost. Machop lunged. It took advantage of how exhausted Cyndaquil currently was. Sam tried to call for a tackle, but instead of the move landing, Machop wrapped its arms around her body and heaved her into the air. No! Sam yelled. It grinned, leaning back. Cyndaquil flailed in its arms, failing to properly start her flames. Then, in an instant, the seismic toss brutally slammed her into the floor. Machop got back up. Cyndaquil didn't. Sam was certain that everyone watching had winced. After all, he certainly did. Cyndaquil is unable to battle. Machop is the winner, the referee shouted. The Pokémon returned to its trainer with a big, proud grin on its face, and it was met with a dual high five. Sam's opponent walked off victorious, but Sam was left to return the fainted Cyndaquil to her Pokeball in defeat. Thank you. I pushed you. You did well, regardless of my mistake, Sam whispered to Cyndaquil's Pokeball. As he walked back up to the stands, he silently went over where he had gone wrong. He had fallen into a trap of his own making. I should have switched in Mankey to give Cyndaquil time to rest. By not dividing the battles between my team members, I ended up exhausting her and costing us that fight. Sitting down, Sam was nervous. He couldn't stop fidgeting in his seat. Before, he had no losses under his name, so he had the safety net of a double elimination bracket if he were to make a mistake. Now that he had lost, he was one defeat away from elimination. He rubbed his arms. The room felt empty. Enough battles had occurred that the trainers who had lost twice had all mostly left. It wouldn't be too long now before the preliminaries were over. Then, sooner than he expected, there was a shout calling for the next set of trainers. Sam's head snapped up, and he eyed the display on the board. Field 2, Victor Wright vs Samuel Greyson. Already? He supposed it made sense he was being called up. With so many people already eliminated, the pool of remaining trainers was shrinking by the minute. He left his seat to walk down to the field, where his opponent was already waiting for him. He was an older trainer, looking around 18 or 19 years old. He was dressed in a black, leather jacket and had stubble on his chin and a toothpick held between his teeth. Another kid, huh? This'll be an easy win, the man said, smirking. Sam frowned and clutched Mankey's pokeball. At the referee's shout, he sent out his Pokémon. Murkrow. Mankey. A fighting type? Sweet. We got a free match. Victor cheered. Appearing on the field was a black, crow-like bird with feathers in the shape of a hat on its head. It took one look at where Mankey was hopping between his feet on the ground, and somehow its beak curved up into a smirk not unlike its trainer's own. It was a dual dark and flying type, meaning that Mankey had no strong advantage or disadvantage. Dark types were usually weak to fighting, but flying resisted it. Unfortunately, the flying type was strong against Mankey's fighting type, and there was also the added concern of Mankey's ability to land any attacks. Most people don't think about how hard it is to punch a bird. Mankey. You still have one advantage, here. You're freshly rested whereas this Murkrow has fought, Sam said quickly. Keep that in mind, and be our secret weapon. Mankey punched his hands together before holding them out, already ready to strike. He stared off at the cruel-looking bird. Even with his opponent having the advantage of flight, Sam was sure Victor would not live up to his name. Begin, the referee shouted. Peck. Leer. Both trainers shouted their commands at the same time. Murkrow flapped its wings once to take off from the ground, flying through the air aimed right at Mankey. Mankey had known Leer when Sam first caught him, but now that they had time to train together, he had been able to pick up a few tips from Cyndaquil. A mighty glare dug into Murkrow, yet the bird remained confident and flew straight forward. Mankey tried to strike without Sam even calling for an attack. Murkrow simply turned and pulled its body to the right to let its beak jab into him, unimpeded. Mankey! Sam shouted. His Pokémon cried out in pain. Murkrow flew higher up in the air as Mankey rubbed the point where he was struck. He glared at it with another leer, but the bird was far too smug to be bothered by such a look. Listen to me. I think Murkrow only knows physical moves. If you can time things right. Peck, again. Victor, Sam's opponent, shouted. He then crossed his arms and scoffed. Knew it'd be fast. Sam could see Mankey tense at that insulting comment. This time, Murkrow came down in a dive bomb, its head directly aimed at Mankey. Mankey didn't move, and Sam closed his eyes. I should have paced my team better. Mankey would have had easy wins in the earlier matches, and then Cyndaquil wouldn't have been so tired for this one. He readied himself to hear the one last cry that marked Mankey's defeat, to hear the sound that would signal the end of his participation in this tournament. Yet that sound never came. Instead, he did hear Mankey cry out, but it was the cry of an attack followed by a dull thump. Sam peeked open his eyes. He caught the last second of Mankey landing a karate chop right to Murkrow's neck. A moment too soon, and Mankey's strike would have missed Murkrow entirely. An instant too late, and Mankey's strike would have only clipped Murkrow's tail. He timed it perfectly to land the strike right where Murkrow was vulnerable the most. The karate chop sent it back crashing around the ground, where it started to cough. Except, Mankey lunged forward to be on it before it could even think to recover. His blow came out like a series of furious scratches, but they were more like a mixture of everything Mankey knew. There wasn't anything specific he was using, just raw attacks that contained elements of his other moves like low kick and karate chop. It was simply pure, unadulterated rage that he was using to fuel his fight. In other words, Mankey was behaving exactly like a Mankey. Victor should have known not to insult his strength. Watching the ongoing onslaught, Sam made a mental note that this assault could be improved into fury swipes. He also made sure to keep his mouth shut so as to not ruin Mankey's attacks. Murkrow tried to fight back, but the bird clearly wasn't used to having a monkey assault it so fanatically. Mankey threw his everything into this, overwhelming it, and before too long, the relatively fragile bird's head hit the ground, unconscious. Mankey jumped back and turned towards Sam and huffed, almost smirking at Victor and making light of all of the man's previous, disparaging comments. An easy win, hey? Sam asked. Murkrow is unable to battle. Mankey is the winner, the volunteer referee shouted. Victor almost turned red with anger, but he closed his eyes and took a breath to calm himself down. Good battle, kid. He didn't sound like he meant it. Still, he was politer than some opponents Sam had faced before, and the man headed out of the room. Apparently, his loss against Sam had been his second, eliminating him from the tournament. I'm really glad I caught Mankey, now. After shouting praise to Mankey, the Pokémon puffing up in pride, Sam returned him and went back to watching the remaining matches. More trainers went up and battled, but to his surprise, he was never called up again. The number of people in this room never reached its absolute minimum, as it did seem some trainers who had been eliminated stuck around to watch the proceedings, and there were a handful of more experienced trainers sitting around and watching this just for the sake of entertainment. Thanks for participating, everyone, the same nurse from before said after one last battle concluded below. To those of you who lost but stuck around, I wish you the best of luck competing in your next tournament. To the rest of you, we've finished narrowing down our competitors for the beginners tournament. You'll see which of you managed to make it in and who your first opponent will be shortly. Make sure to visit the front desk to confirm your placement before leaving the Pokémon Center today. For a moment, Sam stared, both dazed and in shock. I made it in? That was our last battle? We have the chance to compete. He wanted to get the curse trademark for Cyndaquil. No, he needed to get it. Learning at least one ghost-type move would be critical, and curse was his only idea on how to help her reach her final evolution. Mankey was capable of learning the move too, and Sam could already see a future in which Cyndaquil helped the fighting type gain a handle on ghost-type energy. He just needed to place and earn the trademark, first. However, when the screen above the battlefields turned on to display the tournament's bracket, Sam almost choked on his spit in his throat. He could see a few familiar faces: Xavier, from the boat, and Eliza, that Slowpoke's trainer, but Reedy was there, too. That wouldn't have been an issue if it wasn't for how things were set up. Sure, she had made it through her own set of preliminary battles, but the first round had placed her to create what could only be called a disaster. Reedy would be Sam's first opponent in the entire tournament. Either she would place highly, or Sam would. Only one of them would be able to continue onward. Chapter 17. Sam rushed back to Reedy's place the moment Cyndaquil and Mankey were finished healing. The nurse passed their Pokeballs over, and Sam dashed out of the Pokémon Center. He released the tired Cyndaquil and scooped her up into his hood to rest, whereas Mankey practically skipped along at his side. The little monkey was ecstatic after his victory. Sam spoke quickly as he moved block to block down the streets of Olivine. Great job, both of you, he said to his Pokémon, darting around a few pedestrians that were returning home from a long day of work. Cyndaquil, I pushed you more than I should, yet you still managed to fight through 5 different battles. Mankey, I underestimated you. You came in clutch against Murkrow. A tired squeak from his hood. Mankey hooted on the ground next to him and leaped in celebration. In the future, I'll work on better dividing up battle experience between the two of you, and we'll work on learning more powerful attacks. Mankey, that means taking that rage you showed and using that to our full advantage. After all, mastery of it is going to be important for your final evolution. Mankey's elated hops slowed down in favor of a slower, more controlled pace. His brow furrowed with concentration as he nodded his head to Mankey. It was as if Sam had just said the most important statement in the world. Before then, we need to head back to her aunt's house. Reedy is there. And we're fighting her. We're fighting Reedy. Ugh, I can't believe it. Something in Sam's stomach twisted when he thought of his upcoming battle. The beginners tournament was supposed to be a way to push his team to new heights, but now he felt like he would just be beating down a friend. Reedy. She was the first person truly friendly to Sam away from home. She was the first person who'd really talked to him other than Cyndaquil. Reedy challenged him to a battle when no one else would. Reedy offered Sam a place to stay, no questions asked. And for this tournament? She was the person who told him about it in the first place. It's not fair. I wouldn't be upset about this at all if we at least made it a few rounds in, first. Instead, we're fighting in the very first round, basically eliminating one of us before we even got a shot to compete. Though, Sam thought it was obvious which one of them would come out a victor. Reedy only had one Pokémon, and Mankey's fighting type attacks meant Teddy Ursa would fall quickly. He hurried back to the small, suburban home with his two Pokémon still out of their Pokeballs. Sam practically threw the front door open when he arrived, panting and searching through the doily-covered room. "Reedy," he shouted. Instead of the girl he was searching for, Sam found her aunt blinking at him from just a few feet away. "Ah! You just missed her, dear. She left to find you only a few minutes ago." Sam almost collapsed where he was standing. Instead, he moved to lean against the doorframe and ran his hand down his face. Of course, he grumbled. She'd want to talk to him as well. With how their training had separated them these past few days, the two had only really chatted about the tournament late at night, when they both returned to rest. "I'll be here, I guess," Sam said. "Reedy should return soon." "Wise," Reedy's aunt replied. "I'm absolutely certain she'll be here before too long." The old woman sent Sam a motherly smile before moving to the nearby kitchen. Sam walked in and closed the door behind him, but before he could collapse on the couch, the old woman's voice called out to him from the other room. "Reedy told me the news," the woman said. "You and Reedy will be battling one another in the first round." "Yeah," Sam replied. He couldn't stop a long sigh. It really was unfair. The old woman seemed to have a different perspective on the matter, though, as she chuckled lightly and poked her head out back into the living room. "It's a dilemma, but one for the future. For now, would you mind assisting me? I have some cookies I'd like to make. You should join me." Sam nodded tiredly and pulled Cyndaquil out of his hood. He placed her into the corner of the couch, where a far too frilly pillow served as a comfortable nest. Mankey, meanwhile, hopped up onto the recliner chair and grabbed the nearby remote. He turned on the television and began flipping the channels. He seemed more enthralled by the ability to change what was being displayed rather than the actual picture on the TV. Sam entered the kitchen once his Pokémon had settled in. After all their hard work today, they deserved to rest. Here, he could see that Reedy's aunt had already taken out all the baking ingredients needed. A bag of flour, butter, eggs, and then some Blossom farmed sugar were all set up on the counter. "I hope sugar cookies are fine," she said. "Yeah, that's fine," Sam said. His mind was a little focused on the upcoming battle to feel any hunger right now. The old woman hummed and started to measure out what she needed into a bowl. Sam moved to join her at her side. "So," Reedy's aunt started, "did you know I originally had no clue Reedy was coming here?" "What?" Sam asked. "Indeed. She simply showed up at my door one day and asked to stay. Obviously, I couldn't refuse." Sam immediately grimaced when she said that. Reedy had invited him to stay here too, which meant her aunt had even less preparation for his arrival than he had thought. Yet, while the grimace appeared on his face, the woman cheerfully handed him a bowl of ingredients and a whisk. "Mix," she said. She then shook her head lightly, as if to admonish him for his silent, internal guilt. "Oh, don't you worry about it," she said. "I appreciate having company, no matter the circumstance in which it arrives. But I bring up that fact to state the truth of the matter, Reedy came here without her parents' knowledge." "Oh," Sam said, still stirring. She nodded, putting her hands behind her back, and watched Sam mix the ingredients closely. He felt like a little kid again, when his mother would watch him do something from over his shoulder. He found himself standing up straighter and putting more focus into doing a good job. "Some say too much sugar can ruin a cookie. I just like it sweet, myself," Reedy's aunt eventually said. "As for Meredith, she's sweet, too. I know she didn't want to tell her parents because she didn't want to worry them. They're always worrying, those folks. Between their company, a lack of work, and all the trouble Meredith gets up to. Well, before you came, I never once heard her mention any human friends. Can you imagine that?" Sam pressed his lips together. Reedy had seemed rather friendly, but at the same time, she was a little overbearing. She did stick around without him asking her to, but he didn't begrudge her for the company. If anything, she was one of the first humans that had really talked to him back. After all, back in Dewford, Sam only had Cyndaquil, his mom, and Delcatty. Everyone else was far too active and a little turned off by his love of books. Needless to say, I was surprised when you knocked at my door, Reedy's aunt continued. There was no way I'd turn you down, and I'm glad I didn't. When you're not here, Reedy talks about her plans for training a lot, but she also tends to talk about how cool you are. Oh. It's all right, the old woman said, saving Sam from his sputtering. You don't need to say anything else. I shouldn't say anything else, either. It's rude to talk about people behind their backs. I just wanted to explain my own perspective a bit more. Oh, and by the way, you don't need to stir anymore. Sam looked down. The cookie dough was properly mixed. It had been getting harder and harder to stir it, but he had been so focused on his thoughts that he hadn't noticed. Then, a beep. The oven was heated to the right temperature. I can get the tray set up, and you can. Sam. Reedy's voice practically shook the house, and her aunt closed her mouth before continuing. She simply smiled and quietly took the bowl away from Sam as he rushed out of the kitchen, with no more words exchanged between them. Reedy stood in the doorway much in the same way Sam once had. She was standing there, panting, a tinge of desperation to her voice. When she saw him, she grinned, and despite all of her obvious tiredness, she marched right up to him and jabbed a finger into his chest. Don't you dare go easy on me, she all but accused. Sam hesitated for a second. Excuse me. Reedy responded with a sharp but challenging grin. I know you. I mean, I know I've only known you for about a week now, but I still know you. You're the kind of guy who'd get all torn up inside when he learns he's fighting a friend. Sam had to look away. But we're friends, and friends don't let one another down, she continued. And letting me down would include going easy on me. You better not get swallowed up by your nerves or even let me win. Doing that would be a huge insult to everything Teddy Ursa and I did to get here. Speaking of Teddy Ursa, the little bear Pokémon stumbled up to the open front door behind Reedy. His shoulders heaved up and down with every breath, and he wobbled as he walked over to the couch to hop up and lay down on it. Cyndaquil squeaked a quiet greeting at him. Teddy Ursa replied with a short but friendly growl and a tired wave of his paw. Sam regretted what he said next, but the words left his mouth before he realized what he was saying. But I beat you on the boat. PSH. Like that matters. Sam opened his mouth to counter, but Reedy pushed through. See, Teddy Ursa and I have been training for days, and now we're stronger than ever, she declared. You really think that a battle from last week means anything? Ha! You're not going to win. It's Teddy Ursa and me, all the way to the top. She threw up her arms for a cheer, and Teddy Ursa joined in with another tired wave from the couch. Seeing that, Sam couldn't stop the bit of laughter that left his throat. Leave it to Reedy to stay cheerful in this situation. Fine, then, he said, puffing up, himself. Boast all you want, but it's actually going to be me and my team who'll be the winners. Reedy's grin remained sharp and feral. Before, she almost seemed like she was forcing it, but everything now seemed absolutely genuine. That's the spirit, she cried out, but her expression did waver for the slightest of seconds before she spoke next. But, just in case you do win, I want a favor. Sam raised an eyebrow and motioned for her to go. Reedy bit her lip and walked back to the front door to close it, failing to hide how she needed that time to gather the right words before she could explain. Reedy took in a deep breath. Sam, I really like money. Okay, he asked. You don't get it. She shook her head. This tournament isn't just a way to earn a bunch of money, it's also our first chance to be in front of an audience. Think about it. Thousands of people looking at you, their attention divided up between everyone on the field. They're all focused and ready for a match, then BLAM. She punched a fist into her hand. They're hit by someone telling them to hire Vermilion Construction Co., and they're so bewildered that the name sticks in their mind. She smiled mischievously. There was a wild look in her eyes. Sam, this is free advertising space, and if you win, I want you to do my advertising for me, she said. Silence stretched out between them. Sam moved to lean against the couch. Reedy stood proud and tall. Do you actually plan to do that? Sam asked, somewhat exasperated. Of course. Reedy replied without missing a beat. I'm going to shout the name of my family's company to the world, and then everyone will know to hire us. I mean, we've been doing Pokémon-assisted construction work for years, and now I can spread that reputation even further. What's so cool about our work is that we've even managed to land a major contract to make a new office building back in Vermilion, but... Reedy sighed and rubbed her head. She turned to lean against the back of her couch the same as Sam. Despite everything, we're still small. Everyone always keeps looking to more established companies, so we don't have enough money to start the project. She then turned to lock her eyes with Sam's. I'm going to fix that. And no one is going to stop me. Is this why you left home without telling your parents? He asked. Reedy froze up. Her mouth gaped open as she stared at Sam. He looked away, a bit guilty at what he just asked. Auntie figured it out. She told you, Reedy said. Yeah. I'm sorry, Sam replied. Thankfully, Reedy just shrugged in the end, not really bothered by the revelation that Sam knew. It's, whatever. I left home to advertise my family's company. It's not a big deal. People do that all the time. Do they? But, training a Pokémon is expensive, she continued. Teddy Ursa's mom is super strong, and he wants to be strong, so I took him with me. No one back home knew about that until we were gone. They'd say what I'm doing isn't necessary, but I know it is. We have to push to the top and make use of every chance we get. And then, I'll become a Pokémon trainer and make my family's company known worldwide. It's the perfect plan. She was grinning again, downright proud of everything she had explained. Sam felt like her plan was flawed, but he genuinely didn't know enough to say whether or not it had issues. I mean, Stephen Stone managed to bring the Devon Corporation to new heights over in Hone. And I know Sylph co-sponsors the occasional trainer over in, well, here, I guess. Reedy just wants to do the reverse, instead of having a company pay her to spread their name around, she's doing it for free. There were systems in place that proved advertisements worked. Sam was just caught off guard by the whole idea. All right, he said. I agree. When I beat you, I'll make sure to tell everyone about your family's company. PSH. If you beat me, you mean, she countered. You really think you can beat Teddy Ursa? He just completely crushed today's preliminary rounds. He didn't lose even once. Sam blinked in surprise. He hadn't fully registered it until now. If Cyndaquil struggled to get to the final round, what did it mean if Teddy Ursa easily managed to do the same all on his own? He glanced down at the sleeping bear and silently questioned whether or not his own victory was as guaranteed as he thought. Teddy Ursa might have become stronger in the past few days, but he was still only one Pokémon. Sam had two. That would make a difference. Right? Whatever. Sam shook his head. Beat me? Yeah, right. I'd like to see you try. Reedy once again grinned challengingly, and Sam smiled smugly right back. Not long after, there was a ding in the kitchen, and Sam and Reedy spent the rest of the night munching on cookies while talking about everything they would do once they won the tournament. Chapter 18. Sam reacted in the same way half the group around him reacted. He stared up at the massive building in awe. It had a domed roof, was at least 150 feet tall, and its base took up several city blocks. It was a pinnacle of modern engineering, one that couldn't have ever existed back on Dewford. Reedy, next to him, giggled. The tour guide and tournament organizer continued to speak as she led their group in. Olivine Arena is host to major events almost every other week. Between contests, performances, shows, and even tournaments like this one, it's almost always in use and is one of Olivine's primary attractions. In fact, elements of its design actually inspired the in-progress Battle Dome, a mysterious building located in Kanto, said to be a part of. Her words faded away as Sam clenched his hands. Around him, trainers grouped up, all determined and ready for what waited before them. The Johto Beginners Tournament was all about introducing novice trainers to what it was like to be a high-level trainer. This tour was part of that. This building was part of that. Everything here was a part of that. Honestly, it worked. According to the tour guide, on average, at least half of the beginner tournament participants were successful in earning all 8 gym badges. Half of those managed to compete in the annual Silver Conference. Considering that thousands of trainers took on the gym circuit each year and the Silver Conference only allowed 100 of those trainers at most, the percentage of successful trainers stood out among the participants here. Yet, those were humbling statistics. Out of everyone here, only 25% competed in the end-season tournament on average. While beginners, each and every trainer here had the potential to be an elite, yet the vast majority would still fail to get anywhere in their first year. Sam felt small. Reedy elbowed Sam's shoulder, and he looked over as she grinned at him. You know my family's built arenas, too. Nothing as big as this, but they're all impressive in their own way, she whispered. Oh yeah? Sam said. That sounds cool. I guess you'll have plenty of time to explore and compare them to this place once I beat your team. I bet I hay. Reedy fumed while Sam just snickered. She stomped a foot before making a show of stepping a foot away. The tour continued up until the 32 competing trainers were led to a hallway in the depths of the building. It stretched around the central, open battlefield in a ring, and it was lined with enough dressing rooms to support up to 128 people. Each of you will have your own private rooms to recover and strategize between matches, the guide said. A nurse's station is located near each exit, where you'll be able to pass over Pokémon for healing at the end of each battle. With 32 people competing, that's up to 5 serious matches you'll be participating in today. Make sure you pace and heal your Pokémon appropriately if you want to win. Sam nodded, determined. He wasn't going to make the same mistake he made back in the preliminaries. Around him, the other trainers reacted in the same way, and it was clear that each and every person here was determined to win. He actually recognized a few familiar faces in the crowd. Other than Reedy, Sam saw the blue-haired, slowpoke trainer from his preliminary rounds, and Xavier was there, too. The boy from the boat almost seemed to make a point of glancing over Sam as if he weren't there, however. Really? What did I ever do to him? Each trainer here represented a threat Sam would have to beat, and for most of them, he had no clue what their teams were. For now, he just had Reedy to beat, though he couldn't help but still be a bit nervous about the power of the other trainers' teams. There's a limit of 3 Pokémon in a match. Really think you and Teddy Ursa will be enough? Sam whispered to Reedy. PSH. Of course. Teddy Ursa is the strongest Pokémon here, she said outright. That earned her a few withering glares, which she responded to with a smug smirk. Sam just sighed and moved forward as the tour guide began pointing out each participant's individual rooms. He said goodbye to Reedy and entered his, where he closed the door and sent out his 2 Pokémon. So. Reedy, hey, he mumbled. The room was simple enough. A wall mirror. A stool. A couch. A cabinet for storage. Sam walked over to sit on the stool and spun around to properly face his team. Cyndaquil stayed on the floor, waiting intently for what he would say, but Mankey went over to the couch and plopped down, where he bounced up and down on the padded cushions. Reedy's team is just Teddy Ursa. I know with all of our advantages, we should be able to beat him, but... She managed to make it through with only 1 Pokémon. How many other trainers here managed to do the same? Cyndaquil walked over and raised her front paws up, and Sam recognized that as the sign she wanted to be lifted up. He bent over to heave her off the ground and place her in his lap, and she snuggled closer to his stomach and made a satisfied noise. That was her trying to reassure him. If Cyndaquil could behave so calmly, then Sam could do the same. You're right. We can do this, Sam said. There was a smacking noise, and Sam looked over to see Mankey munching on something he had pulled out from between the cushion of the couch. The primate blinked at the sudden attention but went ahead to give Sam a thumbs up all the same. In a way, the sheer nonchalance of that act helped Sam feel even more confident than before. Above his head, a television hung on the wall, and Sam picked up the remote to turn on the television to play. It was already set to the correct channel, displaying the feed of the tournament that was being broadcast nationwide. Sam chose not to think about how many people would be tuning in today. On the screen, a young woman stood in the center of an arena battlefield, wearing a teal dress with a white top. Her brown hair hung down her back with 2 portions done up into pigtails that stood up on the sides of her head. Stands rose up behind her, though they weren't filled to the brim. This tournament didn't quite reach the same level of popularity as a league conference, but there were enough people here that it was still crowded. Hello everyone. The woman spoke quietly and with a small smile on her face. There was a polite applause in greetings. My name is Jasmine. I am the Olivine City Gym leader. Today, I have the honor of hosting the Johto Beginners Tournament, she said, letting her voice drift off. It's lovely that our great city had the chance to hold it this year. She looked nervous. She couldn't have been that old, probably around the same age as Brawly. Yet, where Brawly had a boisterous, can-do attitude, Jasmine didn't have quite the same presence. Sam actually had trouble believing she was the city's gym leader. Jasmine continued to speak in a soft voice as she went over the tournament's rules. Teams of up to 3 Pokémon were allowed to compete, and participating trainers were all required to be novices. No one who had earned a gym badge was allowed to sign up, but that didn't necessarily mean that these battles were simple. Even at the lowest level, strategy could make all the difference in the world. I have Mankey for physical attacks, and I have Cyndaquil for attacking at range. We have a basic strategy for Teddy Ursa, but is that going to be enough? He grimaced, and Jasmine took a deep breath. That's all I need to say about the rules. The tournament will start soon, but before we bring in our first trainers. She smiled nervously and fidgeted around to reach into a pocket in her dress. She actually grinned at the camera when she did that, it was almost as if she was proud her dress had pockets. Pulling out 2 Pokeballs, she tossed them into the air. Here's what your Pokémon might achieve in the future. As a demonstration. A roar shook the building around Sam, and then the same sound played out of the television a second later. He almost fell from his chair out of surprise when the television screen became consumed by the metal of an enormous Pokémon. Cyndaquil shivered. A rough but sleek body. Craggy spikes poking out at regular intervals. A head the size of a car and teeth likely capable of eating a car. Jasmine's Steelix was enormous, and the Pokémon immediately moved to curve itself around her protectively. She was only as tall as its head, and the rest of its snake-like body stretched out behind it several times over. This is Steelix, and that is Magneton, Jasmine said with a smile. Sam hadn't even noticed her Magneton floating in the air. His gaze was firmly locked onto the behemoth of a steel type. This might be the beginner's tournament, but each of you hold the potential to eventually compete with my team, Jasmine said, confidence beginning to inch into her voice. That goes for all of you, even the ones that weren't able to compete. With enough dedication and effort, any Pokémon can stand at the top. All it takes is a proper connection to fuel that growth. Believe me when I say that even the meekest of Pokémon can become powerhouses in their own right. I know from experience that all it takes is a bit of determination to reach new heights. Believe me, and I'll believe in you. All of you are Pokémon trainers, and all of you can become elite if you really try. She smiled brilliantly, her eyes now properly taking on the edge an elite trainer would have. This was a gym leader. Jasmine was a woman who excelled with steel types, someone whose Steelix seemed like an insurmountable beast. We'll beat her one day, Sam declared. And I don't mean that we'll beat the weaker team she keeps for a low-level gym challenge. I mean that we'll beat her actual team, and put that Steelix in its place. The audience was in an uproarious cheer, celebrating their gym leader and her incredible Pokémon. Jasmine said a few more words to wish all the competitors luck, and then her Steelix pushed its head under her legs to scoop her up and off the field. Sam had goosebumps. Mankey's hands were clenched into fists. As for Cyndaquil, she stared at the now empty screen. There was a certain determined glint to her eyes. We know who our opponent is. We know her basic strategy. Considering she told us not to hold back, Sam reached into his backpack to take out the new Pokédex. His Pokémon turned to him, and he grinned confidently right back. Let's make a plan that'll guarantee us a win, he said. A Spearow blew a Poliwag out of its water. A Nican squeezed the consciousness out of a Centaurette. A familiar Slowpoke crushed a Nidoran against the ground. Then, a certain Yanma decimated a Spinarak's attempts to build a web. These Pokémon were Sam's opponents. Every one of them fought with such skill and such fury that he almost felt out of place being here. He had a plan against Reedy, but knowing what lurked past the first round was horribly intimidating. Still, he slapped his own face to stay focused. Bad, Sam. Only think about what comes next, not what's after. He needed to narrow his thoughts. His match against Reedy was next. The crowd was cheering when Sam stepped out of an entranceway onto the battlefield. It took all of his effort to not shrink in on himself. At least several hundred people were present, with even more watching on the television at home. He hadn't realized just how big the beginners tournament was, but if so many people traveled to Olivine just for the chance to compete, he felt that he shouldn't have been surprised. Across from him, Reedy left her own exit, practically strutting when she stepped out onto the field. The grin on her face was as wide as ever, and she already clutched a Pokeball in her hand. But, rather than move to her trainer box like Sam, she walked all the way up to where a sweatshirt-wearing referee stood at the side. Murmurs the people watching were confused. Sam was too, until the referee leaned down towards her. Before the referee could stop her, Reedy lunged forward and grabbed his shirt. There were a few gasps, and Sam's hand smacked his own forehead. Reedy grabbed the referee's shirt-pinned microphone and was now shouting into it. Get all your construction needs with Vermilion Construction Co. Located in Vermilion City, its work will not leave you AC. A nearby Alakazam telekinetically grabbed her. It was here to provide a psychic barrier around the battlefield if needed, but right now it was more intent on dragging Reedy away. She was heaved up into the air, surrounded by a blue aura. She flailed her limbs for a second before going slack in defeat. Well then, the referee said with a grunt. A few members of the audience chuckled. Do that again, and you'll be disqualified. Understand, miss? The Alakazam deposited Reedy in her appropriate trainer box. She sent a thumbs up to the referee in acknowledgement, but the grin on her face was not guilty in any way. The referee sighed and somehow managed to maintain his professionalism. He cleared his throat before speaking again. This battle follows the same basic rule set as all league standard battles, he called out in a voice that echoed over the field. Healing items used by trainers are not allowed. Held items are allowed. Trainers have a number of available switches equal to one less than the maximum team limit. In this case, each of you can swap your active Pokémon twice without needing to wait for them to faint. The battle will progress until all of one trainer's Pokémon are unable to continue, where the trainer with Pokémon remaining will be declared the victor. Any questions? He looked between Sam and Reedy. Both of them shook their heads no. Then, without further ado, he held up a flag in each hand, one green, one red, the two colors representing the two trainers participating in this match. Trainer Samuel. Trainer Meredith. Please send out your Pokémon. Both Sam and Reedy moved immediately, Reedy tossing forward the Pokeball she already held, and Sam reaching into his pocket to pull out his own. Her ball opened up to send out Teddy Ursa, as expected. For Sam, Mankey hit the field. The shout that would start the match came less than a second later. Begin. Go for Fury Swipes, Teddy Ursa. Reedy shouted right away. Low kick, as planned. Sam yelled. Sam's strategy was simple, he wanted Mankey to wear down Teddy Ursa in melee to open up the bear to being burned at range. He was playing for the long game, where Teddy Ursa would be slowly worn down to grant him an eventual victory. In other words, he was playing it safe. He didn't want to underestimate the normal type in the slightest. Except, he kind of did. Mankey ran forward like an ape, hands over legs, charging right at Teddy Ursa. The little bear bared his claws right when Mankey dived into a slide to try to kick Teddy Ursa's legs out from beneath him. However, while the attack did strike, Teddy Ursa only winced even through the super effective damage. Mankey's slide came to a complete halt as his eyes widened in surprise. Then, there was a slash across his side. Then another. And another. Karate chop. Sam yelled. He hoped that a strong blow would stop Teddy Ursa's fury swipes. Mankey struck. He desperately swung his hand forward. Just like the low kick from before, it did hit something, but when Sam looked closer, he saw that Teddy Ursa had caught Mankey's attack. The bear smirked. Mankey snorted, trying to hide his worry with faux annoyance. Scratch! Reedy shouted. Leer! Sam countered. No longer trading speed for power, Teddy Ursa's scratch came out much more brutal than before. Mankey tried to throw him off with a leer, but Mankey didn't have the same experience with the move that Cyndaquil had gained from all of her spars with Delcatty. As a result, it wasn't enough, and the scratch tore across his face. He cried out in pain. Ultimately, Mankey's species tended to be more about offense than defense, they weren't the sturdiest Pokémon around. After having already taken a brutal fury swipes, the scratch forced Mankey back. He hit the ground hard, and after all that previous damage, he did not get up afterwards. Mankey is unable to battle, the referee called out. Trainer Samuel, please send out your next Pokémon. Sam stared at his fighting type in shock before turning up to look at Teddy Ursa. The bear was panting a bit, but he hadn't taken that much damage. He was putting more force onto his right leg rather than his left leg after taking that low kick, but the scuff left from the attack didn't look serious enough to actually warrant a change in how he fought. That was so fast. Reedy was living up to what she had said. She was having Teddy Ursa throw his entire raw power into this battle, and she was showing off the strength needed to get through the preliminaries without losing. Teddy Ursa might have been just one Pokémon, but where his stamina was limited, Reedy could focus all of her training entirely on him. Individually, he outclassed both of Sam's Pokémon. Mankey still managed to land low kick. We'll need to hope that was enough to weigh the odds in Cyndaquil's favor. Giving up, Sammy boy! Reedy shouted in a sing-song voice, taunting Sam as he stared at the field without making a move. Sam scowled and returned his Pokémon. He didn't react more than that out of fear that the awful nickname would stick. Cyndaquil. Replacing Mankey on the field was Sam's sole other Pokémon. Cyndaquil appeared and paused, recognizing how Teddiursa looked less damaged than planned. Continue, the referee called out. Sam was quick to throw up a hand, pointing forward as he yelled for Cyndaquil to use her first move. Smoke screen. Meanwhile, Reedy maintained her grin and shouted for the same attack from before. Fury swipes. Cyndaquil's back blazed bright, and she exhaled out a plume of smoke from her mouth. The field became obscured by a black cloud, hiding both Cyndaquil and Teddiursa from within. Then, a flash. Faint wisps of heat glowed inside the smokescreen as Teddiursa cried out in pain. Ember. Good, she remembered the strategy. Sam clenched his fists and tried his best to figure out what was happening inside of the smoke. The smokescreen wasn't thick enough to completely block his view of Reedy, but she did become a shadowy figure with only the barest hint of details on her face. Still, it was pretty obvious that her focus was entirely locked onto the battle as well. She shouted out a command while staring into the smoke. When you're hit, run in that direction and use Scratch. Sam grimaced. Cyndaquil could move and attack, but her actual speed still wasn't that great. There had been some minor improvements since her tie against Yanma, but not enough to make a difference. So, he bit his tongue. He chose not to speak, letting Cyndaquil decide when to use Ember on her own. He hoped making it less obvious for Teddiursa would help, but at the same time, it meant he was just standing there and waiting. Seconds passed. Sam could smell the acrid scent of Cyndaquil's smokescreen in the air. Everyone focused intently on the cloud, until... Run! Sam shouted. There was the glow of an ember. The sound of back paws crunching over a dirt field. Sam had yelled to try to get Cyndaquil to flee, but his order came too late. Ember hit, but it gave away Cyndaquil's position to Teddiursa. Sam could hear her shout as a scratch landed across her body, and a growl from Teddiursa had him carry through that attack to toss her out of her smoke in a puff. This time around, she did land on her feet, an improvement from her battle against Buck and his Makahita. However, she wasn't alone. Teddiursa exited the smoke after her. He was charging. The small bear Pokémon had both of his claws held up high, ready to unleash his fury swipes the moment he was in range. Reedy had pulled the same trick of not calling for an attack. Why would she need to if Teddiursa only knew 2 moves? As for Cyndaquil, she was panting. Scratch might be a weak attack in high-level matches, but here, Teddiursa was strong enough that each scratch were painful blows. One solid attack, and Cyndaquil would likely faint. Teddiursa was injured, but not to the point where one ember would finish him off. Not just that, but Teddiursa wasn't burned, either. There was nothing reducing his physical power, and nothing that made him more tired out than normal. Sam had to pull out something wild if he wanted to win. Thankfully, he at least maybe had something in his back pocket. Leer, he said quickly. And then... Sam gulped. Flame Wheel. Cyndaquil hadn't been able to master the move just yet, but if there was ever a time to do so, it was now. Teddiursa's charge almost fell flat as Cyndaquil sent a devastating glare towards Teddiursa. The little bear seemed shocked that she could look at him in such a way, and he stumbled slightly while rushing over the ground. The delay wasn't enough to affect the power of the incoming move, but it was just enough to give Cyndaquil time to act. She jumped. She didn't leap forward, but she jumped up into the air. As if preparing for a tackle, she brought her head down, but then she continued that movement by pulling herself into a ball. Flame Wheel failed at first. Cyndaquil started to fall, rotating in the air without much happening. The flames on her back were blasting out in full force, yet they weren't wrapping around her like the move required. However, when she hit the ground, it was like a match striking the side of its box. Flames gathered on the ground and were pulled up and around her with every spin. She stayed in place, but every spin made more and more fire circle her and join her in this attacking move. Yes. You did it. Sam called out. Honestly, he had never felt more proud. Eventually, the rate at which she was spinning was too much, and Cyndaquil practically exploded forth. She left flames in her wake as she shot right at Teddiursa, who was starting to nervously take a few steps back. Her flame wheel slammed into his chest, hurting him with the impact and proceeding to burn his brown hair. Then, Reedy called out. Sam had heard the line she used once before. Push through and punch them in the face. Teddiursa should have fainted. Specifically, if Teddiursa was at the same level as Cyndaquil, he would have fainted, but Reedy's training over the past few days meant he now surpassed her. As a result, he roared as Cyndaquil ground fire into his chest, clasping his arms around her body as if going for a tight hug. The pressure squeezed her until she stopped, and Teddiursa grinned at her shocked face. He threw her into the ground. He threw her into the ground. All it took was one more shout from Reedy, one shout of "do it," for Teddiursa to lunge forward and unleash a fury swipes against Cyndaquil's prone form. The tips of Teddiursa's claws glinted in the midday sunlight. Raw, unadulterated normal-type energy coursed through them as he put his everything into this attack. Sam called for an ember, but it was pointless. The move came out before Cyndaquil got the chance to react. She wasn't great in melee combat, only really having tackle and now flame wheel at her disposal. As it stood, she was helpless under Teddiursa's assault. Within only a handful of seconds, he pulled back from the unmoving Pokémon on the ground. Cyndaquil is unable to battle. Trainer Samuel has no more usable Pokémon. Trainer Meredith wins, the referee called out. Sam stared, slack-jawed. He lost. Mankey had the type advantage. Cyndaquil's flames should have been too hot for Teddiursa to handle. Heck, he had 2 Pokémon to Reedy's 1. Yet, she had pulled through. Teddiursa panted, heavily injured, the only Pokémon left standing. Neither Reedy nor Sam immediately returned their Pokémon. The audience cheered, and the smokescreen slowly dissipated. Eventually, it faded away enough so that Sam could see Reedy's face. Her eyes were red. She rubbed her arm against her face. She was doing her best to muster a smile and failing to do so. He touched his own eyes. Moisture came off onto his fingers. I lost. The words hit him like a truck. Robotically, he returned Cyndaquil back to her Pokeball. Reedy moved onto the field, her own movements coming rather stiff. She scooped up Teddiursa in one arm, where he sat like a young child. Sam followed, dazed. When he met Reedy, he heard a question he hadn't expected her to ask. We're still friends, right? He blinked. She was genuinely on the verge of tears. The whole idea of no longer being friends just because of one battle was so ridiculous that he... Sam giggled. Yeah, he said, speaking as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Of course we're still friends. Just because I lost doesn't mean I'm going to stop hanging out with you. Teddiursa was incredible. Mankey was incredible. Cyndaquil was even better, I mean, she figured out Flame Wheel. Did your Pokémon figure out an attack mid-battle? He grinned at her, a little smug. Reedy let loose a hiccuping laugh, herself. All right, she said, a proper grin returning to her face. Great match, Sam. He clasped her free hand and shook. It really was, he said. Reedy wiped her eyes one more time as Sam smiled, and the two of them waved to the audience before moving off the field. He might have been eliminated in the very first round of the tournament, but Reedy hadn't. She still had a chance to win. No matter what, only one of them would have advanced anyway, but Sam still had fun. He would have plenty of chances to do better in the future. And he would dedicate himself to ensure that he would never lose again. A loss like this would only happen once. Sam would make sure of it. Chapter 19. Reedy. You can do it. Sam screamed at the top of his lungs, trying to force his voice over the clamor of the crowd. His hands gripped the railing, and Cyndaquil hung off of it, shouting her name just as hard. For a moment, her fervor made it seem she was about to topple forward, but Mankey jumped up to pull her back, and then both Pokémon returned to shouting, too. But Reedy didn't hear them, as her face was scrunched up with worry that replaced her usual smug confidence. Teddiursa was battered, poisoned, and exhausted, but he wasn't giving up just yet. Fury swipes, she ordered. The little bear leaped up and slashed downwards. His arms spiraled forward like a child trying to maintain their balance, but he was trying to absolutely eviscerate his foe. Unfortunately, the opposing Pokémon cackled and merely shifted out of the way. Sam groaned horribly and barely resisted putting his face into his hands. Any other day, and he would have been jealous of the trainer with the ghastly on the field. Now, Now, Sam was just getting frustrated. It's immune. You have to figure out a different way to damage it, he yelled again. His Pokémon matched his volume, but Reedy still didn't hear. Teddiursa, you just need to land one strong hit on its central body, Reedy said, eyeing the darkened orb in the center of Ghastly's gaseous form. I believe in you. Please. Just one hit, and you can. Go ahead and finish it off, Ghastly, its trainer said. Reedy was in the top 8. She and Teddiursa had utterly destroyed her previous opponent, a pair of Bellsprout whose vines had been torn up by Teddiursa's claws. This trainer was a completely different story in just how difficult he'd been to fight. First, an Akans had poisoned Teddiursa, and then a tentacle had worn him down. Now, there was a Ghastly, where Reedy had not put 2 and 2 together to realize that if Teddiursa landed a hit, any extra damage of the attack would be worthless against the ghost type. Reedy, please. Sam shouted, but his yells continued to go unheard. Ghastly dove down in the air, rushing to where Teddiursa was swaying where he stood. It popped up right in front of his face and shouted, causing the bear to flinch back in surprise. This wasn't even a move, it was just a frightening shout. Still, with just how worn out he was thanks to everything else, Teddiursa fell back, and he did not get up. It's over, Sam groaned. His Pokémon groaned alongside him, covering their faces with hands and paws. On the side of the field, a referee swung down a flag. Teddiursa is unable to battle. Trainer Meredith has no more usable Pokémon. Trainer Edgar wins, the referee called out. Reedy stared at the field, seemingly lost under the weight of her own defeat. Her opponent, Edgar, laughed and hugged his Ghastly, the poisonous smoke surrounding the Pokémon wrapping around his chest as he wrapped his arms around the central sphere. She was never going to win this fight, Sam could tell. Ghastly had done well to manipulate her into thinking it was dodging moves to avoid damage, but truly, Teddiursa knew no attacks that could have bypassed its ghost-type immunity. The audience clapped around Sam, cheering for a battle well played. To reach the top 8 with only one Pokémon was incredibly impressive, and to lose solely because of blatant immunity meant Reedy could have progressed further against a different opponent. Yet, Sam wasn't paying attention to the crowd's reactions, nor did he share the same excited feeling as the rest of them. Instead, he was just worried about his friend, who stiffly shook Edgar's hand before running off the field. We're going after her, he declared. Cyndaquil let loose a squeak, immediately agreeing with his plan. Mankey, though, looked a little disappointed they wouldn't be watching any more battles. He still followed along. Sam pushed through the crowd, squeezing through and apologizing for any unintentional bumps into them. Once he reached the staircase, he dashed into the arena's interior and ran deeper inside. Reedy, he shouted. He got no response, so Sam kept running. He searched the competitors' rooms. He searched where the nurses healed Pokémon. And he searched the stands, hoping she had returned to watch the rest of the tournament. But, no matter where Sam looked, he did not find Reedy. Out of options, he returned to her aunt's place out of hope she would head back there. Day turned to dusk, and dusk turned to night. Sam sat and waited in the living room for Reedy to come back, but as the moon passed through the sky and the sun began to peek over the horizon, Reedy still did not return. When the tournament ended the next day, the final 4 participants of the tournament were presented with a prize. Each one of them got a cash fund to help support them on their respective journeys, and they got a selection of berries, TMS, and the first place winner even got a Pokémon egg. However, the overall winner did the unexpected and turned down that egg, surprising everyone involved. He was the same boy who had beat Reedy Edgar, and he didn't want a Pokémon on his team that wasn't a poison type. So, instead, the second place beginner trainer got the egg, and he did not look happy about it. Sam was amused when the second place finalist's face twisted up in disapproval when the egg was passed to him within its protective case. If you don't win, you've lost. Right, Xavier? He watched this all happen from within Reedy's aunt's home. The only thing he received in exchange was a simple participation ribbon. It was akin to something someone might earn from winning a Pokémon contest, but it was clearly labeled to market as a prize for placing in the top 32. Overall, it was pretty useless. He was tired, but Sam refused to go to sleep. He needed to make sure Reedy was okay. Cyndaquil nudged him, trying to encourage him to nap while she kept watch instead. He refused. After all, Sam wouldn't sleep until he found her if she had gone missing, too. Mankey slipped out the back a few times, but he always stayed nearby. Sam drank the coffee that Reedy's aunt offered. He could feel the bags under his eyes, but he refused to fall unconscious. Reedy will be back, her aunt would say, speaking as if she knew that to be the undeniable truth. Give her time. Her loss is not anything to mourn. Instead, celebrate how high she managed to place. But Sam stayed up, and dawn crested back into day. Every movement felt sluggish as he sat in the living room and waited for Reedy to show back up. Then, a click. The handle of the front door twisted open. Sam shot to his feet and snapped his gaze to the entrance. Reedy stepped inside, yawning and looking just as tired as he was. "Reedy," he shouted, honestly in slight disbelief. The girl blinked and turned to Sam, looking surprised that he was there. "Sam. Good, you're here." She had a bag slung over her shoulder that she dug into while quickly moving forward. "It took me all night, but I managed to finally trade for it. You'd be surprised just how rare it was even though no one else seems to care about it." "What? What are you talking about?" Sam muttered as Reedy moved closer. "I thought you had run off. I thought you were upset you lost." She paused when approaching him and stared at Sam, confused. "Why would I be upset? I managed to advertise my family's company, and I managed to beat you." The grin on her face was as wide as ever, and Sam couldn't stop himself from smacking his own forehead. "All this time, you were trading," she cheerfully replied. "Didn't get much for placing as high as I did, but I did get an exclusive ribbon, of which there's only 8 in the world. Took some asking around, took some looking for favors, but I managed to trade it away to get you this. Here." Grinning, she pulled out the object she was holding to present it to Sam. Sam stared at it in complete silence. It took him several seconds to gather up any words. "A curse trademark," he said, dazed. "Yet. I heard you talking about it, and I thought it wasn't fair that I got something out of this tournament while you didn't." She held it out forward a bit more, encouraging Sam to take it. He stood there, not moving, before falling back onto the couch to laugh. "What? You don't want it?" Reedy stomped a foot, annoyed, but Sam just threw his head back and laughed even harder. No. It's not that, it's just. You were gone all night. Considering you disappeared after your loss, you understand why I might have been worried, right?" "Oh, hey." Reedy moved to sit down on a reclining chair. There was a flash of light, and Teddy Ursa released himself from his pokeball to hop up and sit next to her. "I didn't think about that. I mean, yeah, I was upset, but I went to the Pokémon Center to heal Teddy Ursa instead of using the nurses at the arena. I felt like they would have better supplies to treat him. He was poisoned, after all," she said. Sam shook his head. "No wonder I couldn't find her." He sat there, enjoying the silence and the knowledge that his friend was actually okay before he spoke next. "You know, for such a greedy person, you're surprisingly not that materialistic." Reedy puffed up her face in annoyance. "Hey! I'm not greedy," she shouted. "I'm filial." Sam snorted. Reedy walked over just so she could smack him in the arm. She stood over him, glaring at him like a mother scolding her child, before the pair of them burst into laughter. "So, what now?" Sam asked once they had calmed down. Reedy went silent and inched back to her chair. "I don't know." The beginners' tournament had ended. That had been their shared goal before now. She plopped back down, the sudden motion caused Teddy Ursa to bounce up a few inches into the air. "There's the local gym, which Jasmine runs," Sam said. "That's full of steel-type Pokémon, which I think my team can handle. You, though. Teddy Ursa is tough. Teddy Ursa only knows normal-type moves. It's why you lost to Ghastly." Reedy frowned but didn't comment. Sam started to think. Reedy's amazing at training her Pokémon. Just a week ago, Cyndaquil beat Teddy Ursa, but now she managed to get halfway through an entire tournament with just him at her side. "I know I could probably beat Olivine with a bit more time to get stronger, but what about Reedy? How powerful would she get in that time?" "So, Reedy unconsciously scratched at her arm. "What did you mean by Teddy Ursa only knows normal-type moves?" Sam frowned. "Olivine specializes in the Steel type. Steel types are highly defensive Pokémon that resist normal-type damage." "Oh. Okay." A few seconds passed. "And when you said it's why I lost to Ghastly. Ghost-type Pokémon are completely immune to normal-type moves." It was tricking you by moving around, pretending to be vulnerable to Teddy Ursa's attacks to make it so you wouldn't change your strategy, he answered. She nodded, thinking about it and pursing her lips in consideration. Sam blinked, then he turned her way, staring at her in disbelief. Did you not know? He asked. All right, look. In my defense, most of that stuff is pretty boring, Reedy said. Reedy, the type chart is the most basic of basic things you can know. So what? Does it even matter if we're just going to rely on pure strength, anyway, she shouted. Sam opened his mouth to respond, but then he closed it. He didn't have anything nice to say, after all. Instead, he sat up on the couch to stare Reedy in the eye. She refused to meet his gaze. How much do you know about Pokémon? He asked cautiously, needing her to give a truthful answer. Not as much as you, she mumbled. Sam blinked yet again. But you trained Teddy Ursa so well. My family is all about training Pokémon. My entire life, I've helped out with making sure everyone was up to par for manual labor when it comes to building. We've got Machop, Machoke, Ursaring, and Teddy Ursa here. But you never bothered to look into what's needed to be a Pokémon trainer before you left home, Sam concluded. She once again nodded her head. Reedy is great at training her Pokémon. I'm not. Thanks to the new Pokédex, I know a lot about Pokémon. She doesn't. We're each bad at what the other is good at. We're each good at what the other is bad at. Reedy, Sam said slowly, putting the pieces together in his mind. I have an idea. What if we... Let's travel together. Reedy shouted. Look, Sam. I'm great at training. No offense, but you aren't. Mankey should have put up way more of a fight against Teddy Ursa than he did. Nearby, Mankey snorted, offended. Reedy ignored him to hop up and pace. But, I'm also super bad at knowing what to do in battle, she continued. Yeah, brute strength is great, but if ghost types are immune to it, then what's the point? So, instead, if we travel together to help one another, we can fill in each other's gaps and be stronger for it, Sam finished. Reedy paused and turned to Sam. She now had just the biggest of smiles on her face. Not just that, she said. You know how much money we could save? Pool together our cash, and we could buy bulk supplies for both of our teams and not have to pay anywhere near as much. Sam couldn't help it. The fact that she so quickly resorted to talking about money made him laugh. Hey, she shouted. No, no. You're completely right, he said, waving her off. Sam looked up at Reedy, grinning as much as she was. Let's do it. Let's take on all of Johto together, he said. He stood up, approaching Reedy and offering his hand. She looked at it for only a second before clasping it to shake, squeezing Sam's arm. To partnership, she said. To partnership, Sam wheezed. Her grip was painful. And we already know our first step, defeating Olivine Gym. Reedy declared. So. Follow me outside, mister. I don't care how tired you are, we're going to start training right now. Chapter 20. Reedy agreed with Sam that it was probably smart to let everyone rest. Once afternoon hit, the new pair of traveling companions left to reach the edge of town, finding a location hidden within a sparsely wooded area that ensured no one unwanted would listen in. Cyndaquil was dividing her attention between her own practice and helping others. She now knew Curse. Sam and Reedy had stopped at the Pokémon Center before heading out, and all it took was loading up her Pokeball and the Curse trademark into a specialized PC for her to learn the move. To use it, Cyndaquil crouched down and focused. There were no visual components to it. She had to actively maintain the energy inside of her, which meant it took great effort to move with any decent speed. However, that energy actively reinforced her. Brief spars with Mankey made it clear that she could more easily take hits with it active, and her own attacks came out loaded with energy that made them that much more powerful. Except, it wasn't as ghostly as Sam wanted. He could see why so many argued over its actual type. Ghost-type moves usually had some aspect that was spiritual, misty, or connected to darkness. It was almost entirely physical. He genuinely had trouble understanding how the move turned into an actual curse when used by a ghost type. At least Cyndaquil was working to better get it under control. TMS implanted the memories of a specific technique into a Pokémon's head, but it took active practice to actually master the move. Half of her attention was spent working on Curse, and the other half was spent helping Reedy's Teddy Ursa. Reedy was good at training, so this was a sort of test to both push and assist Teddy Ursa. Cyndaquil was doing her best to help the bear learn how to utilize fire-type energy in hopes that he would eventually figure out the otherwise TM-taught fire punch. Then, finally, Mankey was working on utilizing his own rage to turn Scratch into fury swipes. That was going a lot better, as Reedy gave the surprisingly helpful advice of, "It's literally just Scratch but you use it faster." But, as the three Pokémon trained, neither Sam nor Reedy were letting them work on their own. The pair of trainers were hard at work themselves, except their work was in conversation, trying to fill one another in about their gaps as a trainer. "Back at home, my family was all about building up our Pokémon's physical power," Reedy said, smiling as she clearly remembered some fond memories. "We have a pair of Machoke brothers that can lift over a ton of concrete just on their own. Then, there's Mama not my mom, but a Kangaskhan who's great at setting up all of the heavy equipment just right. Mama Bear, Teddy Ursa's mother, is an Ursaring who. You have both Mama and Mama Bear as part of your family's Pokémon?" Sam asked incredulously. "Shut up. I was, like, 3. How was I supposed to know those nicknames would stick?" Her face was bright red. "But what I was trying to say is that from years of experience, I'm confident the best way to train your Pokémon is to let them do what they want," she said, clearing her throat to regain the pace she had set from before. "You don't need any special exercise for them, you just need to take what they already do and make it more." Sam had out a journal in his lap, not the new Pokédex, but a blank book he was using to record any notes. Reedy was walking back and forth, completely in lecture mode, whereas Sam was resting on a tree stump. When Reedy said that he needed to train his Pokémon by letting them do whatever they wanted, he put down his pen and looked up at her in doubt. "Yeah, I'm not sure I know what you mean," he said. "If Pokémon get stronger by doing what they want, how do trainers make any difference when compared to wild Pokémon?" "I mean, free healing," Reedy stated. Sam had to give her that one. "But, well, it's more like," she grumbled and crossed her arms, struggling to find the right words. Sam could tell that she was more of an instinctual type of trainer. She did what she did because it made sense, not because she was meticulously planning her actions. "Okay, so this is a secret, but Teddy Ursa's Fury Swipes is better than other Fury Swipes at his level." Sam immediately picked up his pen to return to writing. "See, in the wild, Teddy Ursa and Ursaring need ways to sharpen their claws. Usually, it's done by leaving scratches on trees to mark their territory. By the way, if you ever see trees with clawed-off sections of bark, you know you're near a wild Ursaring and you should leave." Sam couldn't resist. "You know that, but not that Ghost is immune to normal." Reedy blushed. "Shut up," she said again, crossing her arms. "I focused on Teddy Ursa, all right? How was I supposed to know there were Pokémon immune to his strength? So, what I did is, I took that habit and had him try to sharpen his claws on other things," Reedy said, clearing her throat and continuing. "We started with harder types of wood. You can get pieces of scrap wood for free outside of any carpenter's place. From there, we moved on to stone, which we literally just picked up off the ground. It didn't really work well at first, because the hard material was making his claws duller rather than sharper. That is, it didn't work until we figured out a trick to it." Reedy stood a little taller. The grin on her face told Sam that she was proud of what she figured out. "See, all Pokémon moves use type energy to fuel their moves, so what if Teddy Ursa did the same when sharpening his claws? Coursing normal type energy made them even stronger than before, and it meant that all of these tougher materials now actually worked to sharpen them. Not just that, but it practiced his control, too, so by starting with something Teddy Ursa already does naturally. You figured out a way to make him stronger just by doing something he already does," Sam concluded. Reedy grinned and pointed at Sam proudly. "Exactly," she exclaimed. He went ahead and furiously scribbled everything she said into his journal. "So then, what do Cyndaquil and Mankey already do?" he mumbled under his breath. "Cyndaquil naps a lot, likes being tucked in, and, maybe try to think more about what she does as a member of her species rather than what she does as an individual," Reedy offered. Sam hummed and tapped his pen against his chin. "A lot of her power comes from the flames on her back," he said. "Maybe we should work on making those come out stronger, faster, and hotter. It would probably work, especially when considering Cyndaquil's potential abilities. Blaze and Flash Fire both needed to be developed, but both of them were focused on controlling fire itself. Going further, Sam was pretty sure that using her back's flames might actually help empower her other moves. Instead of repeatedly using Ember or Flame Wheel to practice her fire-type control, improving how well she could control her own flames might pass benefits into her moves. He wrote all of these thoughts down. He wanted to be able to go back to this later and see how he came to certain decisions. Plus, if he thought up something important and unintentionally skipped over it, at least he would have a record to reread later. And for Mankey, Sam started. That's easy. Just have Mankey beat up Teddy Ursa. Teddy Ursa was in the process of trying to get his paw to ignite against the air, and he stumbled mid-punch to look up at Reedy in horror. Mankey, meanwhile, snapped his gaze to her with his eyes wild in frenzied excitement. I want to make Teddy Ursa unbeatable in melee combat. What better way to do so than to have him constantly be under assault from a fighting type? She grinned confidently, and Teddy Ursa slowly panned a terrified gaze over to Mankey. The monkey interlaced his fingers and pushed them out, cracking his knuckles. A nervous, choking laugh exited Teddy Ursa's mouth as he took a step back. Thankfully, Reedy intervened. Not now, though. Later. If we want to take on the gym, we have to get your fire punch in order, she said. That kind of training will be more effective later on. Two sighs came in response to that, Teddy Ursa from relief, and Mankey from disappointment. Speaking of that, here. Sam reached into his backpack and pulled out a stack of cards. These are for you. The Pokémon Center had some spares. I figured you don't want to listen to any of my boring lectures that much. One of Reedy's eyes twitched as she looked over what she was given. Are these flashcards? She said, almost hissing. Yup. Sam said cheerfully. I can tell you about so many things about Pokémon, but I think we should make sure you have your basics down first. Given that you don't have the type chart memorized just yet, that's absolutely the number one thing we'll work on. I mean, really, trying to use Fury swipes against a Ghastly. Are you ever going to let that go? She grumbled. Not until you have all of this memorized and can tell me the rarer interactions, like which types Bug resists. Reedy opened her mouth then closed it. She mumbled under her breath, Bug types have resistances. She started to flip through the stack, looking at both sides of the cards and reading everything to try to find the answer. The types are fighting, ground, and grass, Sam said after a minute passed without Reedy giving him a proper response. See, not many people know that kind of stuff. But it's important. Imagine if I sent Mankey out against a bug type and had him use Karate Chop. The monkey in question scoffed as if to say he'd win anyway, but one look from Sam made Mankey stomp at the ground, annoyed that Sam had a point. Bug types might have a bad rap when it came to their general strength, but Mankey hadn't reached the point of being able to win against all of them. And then there was a different matter. The new Pokédex. Sam debated telling Reedy about it, but the second he brought up the idea of giving her assigned reading, she simply scoffed and told him to summarize it for her, instead. So it had kind of worked out, in a way. Sam definitely planned to give her some unique information later on, but Reedy wasn't actually interested in sitting down and reading in the slightest. His secret weapon would remain secret for now. But, with everything I found out about Teddy Ursa's evolutions. So now that we have our flashcards, that just leaves our plan to take on the gym, Sam said, deciding that explaining anything too advanced would be a waste of time for now. How exactly are we going to do this? Should we both just head in and challenge the gym leader to a fight? Reedy snorted as if what Sam said was funny. He glared at her until she stopped looking at the flashcards and started to explain. Okay. So there's a process to it. We'll need to sign up to reserve a slot, which might take a while given how busy the city is. That's fine. Gives us more time to train, Sam said. Reedy nodded in agreement. Yeah, but the important part to remember is that taking on a gym requires an upfront fee, a fee that you don't get back if you lose. Sam went silent. Reedy pushed on. I want to say that Teddy Ursa would crush the gym, but you've kind of made it obvious that that won't be the case. Sure, he's strong, but I don't think I have a good handle on how physically defensive steel types are, right? You didn't even know they resisted normal type moves before yesterday. Shut up, Reedy said yet again. At least Teddy Ursa can actually win a fight. Both of them snickered before moving on. Basically, I think you should go first, and I think you should earn the prize money from beating both the trial and the gym leader, Reedy said. Sam tilted his head at her. The trial and the gym leader? What? Reedy sighed, almost disappointed. You telling me you really don't know? He did his best to look away. Really, he had a one-track mind growing up. And that track had been solely about the ghost type. Okay, fine. My family has helped Lieutenant Surge with his gym before, so I know all about it, Reedy said, honestly sounding like she was bragging more than she was explaining something. Trials are only available to trainers with 5 gym badges or lower, acting as an alternative way for those trainers to earn gym badges without needing to challenge gym leaders. Why? Sam immediately asked. The concept seemed so dumb. Gym badges were meant to represent a trainer utterly conquering a gym. Having an easier, alternative method to earn them felt like it lessened their value. Far as I heard, it's more about freeing up the gym leader's time, Reedy explained. Like, so many people are taking on the Pokémon League, and that number is constantly growing. With how common Pokédexes are getting. Sam scowled. Electronic Pokédexes were far more common in Indigo than they had been back home in Hone. Trainers have been flooding the circuit, so it doesn't make sense for gym leaders to take on everyone who challenges them. Instead, gym trials are a way to lessen that flood, because I'm pretty sure it doesn't make sense to fight all those trainers who otherwise won't earn more than a handful of gym badges, she said, tapping her cheek. They set up some kind of challenge run by their gym trainers, the gym trial, and then that's a big chunk of trainers they never need to schedule a slot for. But you said I should take on both, Sam said. Reedy rested her chin on a fist before nodding as if she had given out sage advice. Of course, she easily replied. You get a reward for winning both of them. Given you've said both Cyndaquil and Mankey have an advantage. I should maximize our earnings before you go in, giving us a safety net of cash to fall back on if you lose, Sam concluded. Reedy grinned. Of course, since I'll go second, I won't lose, since I'll have all that extra time to train. But, just in case. Sam nodded. I guess it makes sense, he said. And it's a way to maximize earned experience, too. She actually seemed pretty excited about this plan. Reedy looked downright proud about how she had come up with something so clever. Sam agreed with it, too. After all, after his challenges, he would be able to come back and give her tips or warnings based on how his own battles went. But, before then, we should continue to work on our teams, Sam said. Yet. I need to learn more about Pokémon. And I need to get my Pokémon stronger. Curse for Cyndaquil. Fury Swipes for Mankey. Fire Punch for Teddy Ursa. Plus, all of the general training to make sure everyone was in good shape. Sam was already enjoying traveling with Reedy, even though they hadn't left for anywhere just yet. He knew for a fact they would both end up stronger for it. Barely any time had passed, and he was seeing a difference in his Pokémon. When the time came for them to take on their first gym, both of their teams would be in a much better state than if they had trained them on their own.